expressed in the following are those of its participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the producers and the Six Talk Podcast Network. Also, the following contains mature material and mild language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
Well, hopefully this is working properly here. Well, here we go on this Sunday afternoon because we took our time to start normally. So it's now Sunday afternoon, April the 6th, 2025, presented by Anime North. This is the Anime Roundtable Canada. And good afternoon to everybody from 6 Points, 10 minutes south of the Anime North compound in Toronto's West End. Mike Nicolas overlooking that area, but we are all virtually on in our usual spots. So James Austin further west, Kevin Ing further west as well. And we're billing this as a regular episode because there's more than two of us around the table and we have more than one thing to talk about. There's a few things.
Hello.
Hey, James, I know you're there too.
Am I?
Yeah, well, we have more.
I could just be a talking head.
Well, that's what we all literally look like.
Getting all existential here, I see.
Yeah, well, you can see what we all look like these days. So,
are we going to talk about how we look like in Ghibli form, Mike?
Maybe we should start there. Well, let's just give a sense of what we're doing today. We are billing this as a regular episode, so this now makes it episode 95 of the regular versions. Although we pretty much threw this together last night. So, but that doesn't mean the news certainly doesn't stop, and that doesn't mean we don't have something to talk about. And yes, probably the biggest talking point over the last, almost certainly the last couple weeks has been Studio Ghibli. There is little doubt about that. So, well, I mean, I hinted bringing it up a couple times myself in the streams. And what you're seeing, everyone referred to Miyazaki talking about a 2016 reaction to Miyazaki seeing some AI models. That's the video we're showing here right now. That's the video where I'm showing here right now to everybody on the screen. If you're watching this live, we are also streaming on YouTube and Twitch right now. If you're watching, so. Thanks for joining us if you're seeing this. And so I'm just showing the video of Miyazaki showing his reaction to seeing these AI models and basically where a lot of his comments came from about how this is a insult to life and talking about a friend who is pretty immobile these days, right?
And yeah, there's definitely was context you had to look at from those comments, because if you didn't realize where it was coming from here, it's like you could have thought, oh, he would feel maybe the same way about what we're seeing recently, which he may feel the same way, but probably to a certain degree. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So, okay, what's your reaction to some of this trend that we've been seeing on ChatGPT, being able to make yourself or Ghiblify yourself these days? I mean, like, I remember back in 2008 when the Simpsons movie came out. And remember when there was that, for a little while, Burger King had this thing where you can upload your photos and it would render a Simpsonized version of yourself.
And that's what I was thinking, Mike. We've had filters for years and years, right? Through the phone and all that stuff to make your image look like something else. And you just mentioned the Simpsons. So a lot of it isn't unheard of. And the thing, though, is with the AI, as we know, and we've talked about it tons and tons of time. Like, and especially with ChatGPT, what was it? OpenAI, which has Chat GP. Was it?
ChatGPT, it is, yes.
GPT. I thought it was GPT. See, that's the thing. If you don't keep up, it's like there's OpenAI is the one that owns them, but then there are others out there and stuff like that. But obviously, they're combing the internet for information and stuff like that, and that definitely does make people feel uncomfortable, to say the very least. And that AI can be a thing in the toolbox, as we know, and we've seen that in the anime sphere and stuff like that with Media OCD teaming up with the oh shoot, I forget now, that they've been using and stuff like that for their some of the certain animes and stuff like that to make the image better and stuff like that. It's off the top of my head. No,
AstroRes?
Yep, AstroRes. Yep. So AstroRes is a toolbox, a thing in the toolbox for them that they can use, and they say they don't know how it works, but it works incredibly and stuff like that. And they're not using it obviously for every show and anything they can get the film elements for. They're doing the proper scan, all that stuff. But for certain shows from the early 2000s and the DigiPaint era and some of that stuff, it really does help and stuff like that to use something like AstroRes, since it does produce the results, and that they were cagey at the beginning, and then it's now become a part of the toolbox and stuff like that. But as we know, with things that are just let loose onto the world, it's like we're still in that stage of figuring it out, as I like to say, and especially on the art side and the copyright side, all this other side, because it's like, what happens if they take an image you've drawn and then make it their own, right? And that's the biggest thing and stuff like that. And that isn't really what we've seen here. They're taking a style and stuff like that, and that's another conversation altogether, right?
I guess just to reel back for a second, and maybe maybe what makes the Simpsons thing different, aside from the AI part of it, there was a degree of willingness there with the Simpsons thing, right? When that happened in 2008, that was meant as a promo tool for the movie, which was coming out at that point, and clearly there was a degree of consent by the producers of The Simpsons,
by Fox and stuff like that. Yep.
For that to happen. So that's why, in one sense, it's the same. In
and
another
the
sense,
other thing is, as we know, is this is not like generic cartoon image or anything like that. Like Studio Ghibli, as we know, has a very distinct style. And I think if you have a distinct style, you start crossing some lines in certain places that you better be watching out. But it's hard to say what Studio Ghibli would like. They definitely probably don't feel very happy about it, I bet. But it's hard to say how they are going to respond, because obviously they haven't said anything yet.
Yeah. So,
and if Disney, and I'm sure if Disney had still been involved and John Lasseter had still been there, I'm sure they probably would have said something if they had still been involved. But as we know, G-Kids, which Toho now owns G-Kids, are the ones distributing the Ghibli catalog and stuff like that in North America and a good part of the English-speaking world and stuff like that. So it'd be interesting to see where they're coming from and if they would have a message on their behalf. You know what I mean? For Ghibli.
Yeah. To this point, there hasn't been a public statement by anybody associated with Studio Ghibli to this, as far as I know. So we can only go by these comments from 9 years ago now. And but to this point, they've largely remained silent on this as it has unfolded. Although OpenAI and ChatGPT seems to be pretty unrepentant about what's going on, or they seem to stand by a little bit of what's going on here, going as far as all the founder making some Ghiblified images of himself too. How much? Okay, so we've had these AI discussions already in the past, but more when it relates to translation. Do we take a lot of that? What we've talked about there, apply how much do we apply that, a lot of what we think there to here? I'm thinking probably a lot. So, I mean,
and it depends on what people are using this for. So far, we've just seen them using it for photos and all that other stuff. But it all depends on how far they take it and stuff like that. Do we start having the photos or the images or the stills and then making it into something animated? Do we add voice or something like that of the person's voice? It goes.
so now where's the
so
limit?
many down the rabbit hole. You know what I mean?
Forget the money side of it. It's the identity and which belongs to who, right? The creative side once again, right?
But you can definitely see like this could be the first domino down a very dangerous path. Let's put it that way.
Or for a long domino fall, I guess, like an epic
Mhm.
domino fall. So I guess this is one of those. Okay, where does it stop? Where does it? Where do you want it to stop now? Right. So there's that. Kevin, do you have a like? Where are you on this so far? Or because like, do you like? I when the story came out, and I briefly talked about it on the in the video game stream. I expressed some the only thing I could express was discomfort, but it's just those feelings have only snowballed a little bit, have snowballed significantly in the week or so since then, since I talked about it. So
I mean, it is unfortunate. That sort of goes without saying. If you give any sort of care about art and ownership, and it's not surprising though.
Well, we knew this would happen. We figured a moment like this would happen. This is like, we figured moments like this would happen sooner or later. So it's happened, right? And no matter, it's like a lot of rough things that happen in life. No matter, it'll happen. You brace yourself. You prepare yourself mentally, physically, emotionally for those things. And when they hit, but regardless, when they hit, you're never really ready. Right? You all you can really do is just roll with it and do the best you could. So so a moment like this has happened, right?
I just think sometimes, when will this get too far? Like, I think of this in a broader sense too. Like, I think of how when when the internet became more usable to the general public, it was like the Wild West in a way, right? Like, in a good way. But now you see what the internet has done to society, and
it's killed off more than a few people in it, right?
You just see like the effects of the internet on different kinds of people, and I feel like with AI, this is just, it's like the internet evolution, but they're speed running it, so they say. Because now you hear stories of voice actors trying to protect their voice against companies who would want to use their voice for AI purposes. You hear about how people keep on trying to get through high school and university using AI and creating whole ass assignments out of it
without really knowing anything themselves, right?
You hear about how AI is being used in media, like, of all kinds, for better or for worse. It's like, I think that those are the things that come to my mind when I see stories like the Studio Ghibli AI incident. It's like, at what point do what is the tipping point? Like, at what point will it go too far?
Well, I mean, Terminator. When we obviously people want to now refer to Terminator. People have been jokingly referring to that in the past. I'm not saying it's gotten serious, but it has become bigger food for thought because, to Kevin's point, that's about that speculates on the notion that there was never a tipping point, or more like it never stopped. It never put a break. It could never put brakes on the whole thing.
Or
Right.
And maybe this is a stretch too, but I even think of like AI robot.
I think
I
more
don't
of
think
the
we're not quite there, but
that's the problem. You're right. How close
or
are we?
Scarlett Johansson, the one movie, remember?
Oh, that's Scarlett Johansson. I guess it's more of a case of
hey,
okay.
which one are you talking about? You're not
Oh
talking
no,
about
but the
Ghost in the
Scarlett
Shell.
is there have been models that have been using Scarlett Johansson's voice.
Because she had been in a movie where basically a guy falls in love with an AI, and that was 10 years ago.
Oh, that one. Okay.
So we're at this, like, I guess this is the and this is, I guess, the tension that we're seeing. It's a case of, okay, does AI enhance human life or does AI replace human life or whatever? Right? I mean, when we
It's
talk
going to
about
be a long time before we find out the answer, just like the Industrial Revolution, right? So some people now could be found out to be Luddites and stuff like that, but we don't know how it's going to play out fully. But there definitely needs to be some proactive measures, and different places have tried different things or are trying to, right? So it's hard to say how it's going to go. And even in the labor movement, as we said, people are trying to get protections, and we're not quite sure how those protections will work out and stuff like that, because we're in still very early days. It's like about how AI could transform, for example, voice acting and certain bit parts and stuff like that, or the effects where people are talking behind the characters. You know what I mean? The crowd noise and stuff like that.
well,
Because usually they'd have people in. So it's like, if they use AI, it's like, how are they doing those voices? It's like, how similar do they sound to certain people? Because that is the biggest concern of them stealing their voice print. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, as I said, the AI as a human enhancement or a human replacement. I mean, James Earl Jones, before he passed away, he did sign off on his rights being on the rights of his voice being used in the future for AI models. So, I mean, that's a voice, by the way. That is a voice. So there's we can, but that his story might be an exception. Could we, like, pessimistically, we could think of as an exception, right? Because he had built
Or
so
I
much
guess a
for
different
himself.
time, right? Given when he probably signed that, and where we
Oh,
were
that
at
too.
that
Yeah,
point.
yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say just before. It was still maybe a year or two before his death when he did make that agreement. So there's that. You talk about AstroRes. So there's your as a tool, as a good tool, right?
And it can definitely, depending on, and that's the biggest thing, is everyone's saying it's all encompassing. AI is one thing. It's many things and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's
Sure.
not just one all encompassing thing that does everything. It's many different tools that are AI uses and stuff like that. And we're going to see it more in technology, even the one we're going to talk about coming up later with the Switch 2 and stuff like that, where it's trying to help make the machines run better and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, here I am. And look, on that topic, on the topic of help too. Remember, I'm still trying to do run the whole streaming side and picking clips to put up on the TikTok and the Instagram Anime Roundtable at Anime Roundtable. By the way, here, give me a sec here. At Anime Roundtable, right? So where I was going with this was, so it's kind of overwhelming. I'm trying to see if I can find tools that can help me speed up those processes and find a little bit more efficiency. So,
or as you've seen too, some people use it for their Discord. Discord has different AI mods and stuff like that, and I'm sure Twitch, YouTube, all of them have them to help you through comments and stuff like that. Because once you get big enough, right, it's pretty hard to go through with human moderation. You need a mix of everything.
sure, it's a lot.
Even if it does pick up some weird stuff.
And yeah, and that's, I guess that's what hence the learning aspect of it, or learning AI, right? So there's a bunch of things, and I guess the next salvo or the next checkpoint in the tough discussion, and the latest tough discussion is now there. We knew this would happen sooner or later, and ironically, or maybe not so ironically, our fandom has started the discussion again. You know how I always joke that sometimes that either porn or anime tends to be the driving force behind certain methods of consumption and technological consumption, whether it be VHS, DVD, streaming, or watching things online. So I guess maybe it seemed appropriate that an anime aspect touches off this latest discussion when it comes to AI. Maybe it seemed appropriate that somebody like Hayao Miyazaki started to touch off this discussion, right? We knew it was there. We knew the attention would be there. So now it has attention.
And it's a very distinctive art style that's become beloved over the last 3 decades and stuff like that too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
that shows you the work G Kids and others have done to bring it to global audiences and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is somebody's, effort. Somebody's blood, sweat, and tears could have very much gone into a lot of that, and then to see it fluffed away, right? I mean, this is why I never leave food on the table. This is one of them. This leads to my own mentality about eating. When I get a plate of food, to eat every single bit and leave nothing left over to toss out, because somebody put the effort to cook that. An animal might have died to be on that plate. Somebody put some effort into those drawings. Probably frustrated themselves to get to that point. So, and you noticed, I have not put up any pictures of any Ghiblification images, any Ghiblified images here. I've made it a point not to show that right now. And to anybody watching and to anybody listening, I'm gonna, there's really there's plenty of that to see. You can Google it. I'm sure the algorithms and AI that help out power Google will more than be able to help you there. I think it's Gemini, right? So go right. So it's easy to find. So there's no point in showing any of that here. I don't know. I mean, some people are using this for their own entertainment, for their own pleasure. I hate to use that term, but because I've seen friends and family try making Ghiblified photos of Ghiblified versions of their own photos. I haven't done it myself, but they're cute. But but knowing this, and I'm still not comfortable with it. So there's the salvo, and I guess the next step. Well, there isn't really a next step, but a real next step. But one thing I'm really curious is an updated statement from the people who could be hurt by this. So if Miyazaki actually speaks about the latest, it'll be interesting. If like you said, G Kids or Studio Ghibli as a whole release a statement, it'll be.
I feel like if there was a statement, it might come through G Kids on behalf of Studio Ghibli for Suzuki and for Miyazaki and stuff like that. And unfortunately, Takahata is not with us, but I'm sure he would have some interesting words to say as well.
Mm-hmm. So we'll, that's our thoughts now. And Mo, Amy, I'm sure will have a thought. And this story's like any other story we talk about; it never ends. So we'll keep talking. So we'll come back to it at some other point. Mahara, good to see you in the stream again. And he's throwing Kevin under the bus. Do you want me to show these comments before we continue? Before we lighten it up, as we lighten it up?
Sure, we can.
Okay,
Mahara. I think the last comment related to what we just talked about, right?
Mahara, one time Kevin kicked my dog and he's never met them before. He also stole my starter Pokemon pick from Professor Oak.
Well, you know what? That's the scalpers.
But why is the One Piece TV director worrying more about AI than the Kenshin accusations? Hashtag priorities, Mahara.
Well, that Kenshin series is still continuing on.
They've announced the next season, have they not?
Yeah, they're probably gonna do the whole thing. They're gonna do the whole thing this time.
So Jinshu, I guess, is happening too. Look. Okay, Kevin, do you want to defend yourself first of all? Why'd you kick that dog, dude?
Or why are you scalping Pokemon cards?
Yeah, why were you? Well, basically, do why wouldn't he? Right? Because that's the trend these days, or at the very least, threatening a shopkeeper. Look, and they're all valid questions, although kind of a little bit away from what we've been talking about. And yes, why is the One Piece director worrying more about AI than the Kenshin accusations? I would put I'd like to hear what he has been said about AI. So I don't really know the whole context there.
So I've never seen Maharaja Mac Daddy's dog before. So I don't know how I could kick a dog. Not that I ever would.
Yeah, you do so at your own risk, dude. You do so at your own risk.
And I didn't know Maharaja when he would have theoretically played Pokemon Red, Blue, or Yellow, or Fire Red or Leaf Green. So even if I wanted to steal his starter Pokemon, it'd be way too much effort to do so.
Okay. Now
that would require link cables, or it would have required.
Well, I was gonna say, if it's in the video game and not the cards themselves, it would be hard because we know how terribly those Pokemon games run on modern Nintendo systems.
Does it not run well on 3DS for the last release of them?
Well, no, I was more speaking of the more recent games. Violet and Scarlet.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a whole other discussion.
But anyway, that's why I said modern.
That might come up later, but we'll see.
Has Oda said anything about AI recently? Has he said anything about AI? I mean, that's just to acknowledge his last point, right? So,
well, and to address the other half of the Kenshin accusations, I don't know if he's still here, but were these accusations basically that he's associated with known child pornography?
Yes, because he was a former assistant to him. Yeah, Oda.
There were a lot of people that
he's pretty much I wouldn't say. Well, he hasn't certainly thrown Watsuki under the bus. That's for sure, right? And I think he's got points defended him.
It's the whole jump system, as we know, right? So
I was always under the illusion that because, at least from what we can tell from outside Japan, that there still seems to be a very, how should I say this? I don't want to say tolerance, but just the acceptance that stuff can exist there. that it's just like like it's kind of like a very like like it's like a what's done is done thing, and then and it's just because just because I'm associated with him doesn't mean that like it's like it's the whole like the degrees of separation in a way. I'm not really describing this very well, but
It's a tough one.
yeah,
It's a tough one. I mean, okay, you're a close friend does something really bad. That's the dilemma, is it not?
And
That
their lens
becomes
is through their understanding in Japan and their culture, whereas the rest of the world has a very different perspective and stuff like that. And it's a matter of how will their opinions change over time and over many generations, right?
because you think about it this way, that stuff, at least possessing that stuff, if I'm not mistaken, was only banned because they were going to host the Olympics.
wow. Well, yeah.
It's weird because
Certain
I would
irony.
have thought they would have done that sooner, because remember, they were doing different things, putting more English signs, all that stuff up when Japan and Korea co-hosted the World Cup like over 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
23 years ago. 23 years ago since then.
2002, yeah, or something like that. Yeah.
You think,
But
yeah.
But it was actually, it's funny thinking back. We had talked about the AI, and I just wanted to circle back because I was thinking, since we mentioned anime and then manga and stuff like that, it makes you wonder about those sides on the anime side, since we keep talking about how many anime they have every season, and they're just pumping them out, and they say we don't have enough animators and all that stuff, and they're driving them into the ground and stuff like that. And it makes me wonder because I wouldn't be surprised if AI is going to be used for them, if it isn't already, in certain aspects like creating backgrounds or creating sound effects in manga, you know what I mean, or certain things in the background and stuff like that.
Enhancement or replacement.
And so it's hard to say, because remember that
Right?
used to have the human touch and stuff like that, and the assistants would do it, or other people would have the actual background artists and stuff like that. And it makes you wonder if people are going to shift around. It's like, we need these animators here, and we can be just good enough with the backgrounds for some of these series, like the Isekai series, or some of these other series that are a dime a dozen. And it's going to be interesting over the next few years. I'm thinking to myself then, when I say that, how are these series going to look and stuff like that? Are some of them just going to look even more the same? You know what I mean?
No, but then that starts to get to larger issues about pay and all that stuff too. The way you
it all interconnects, right?
It all interconnects. It all interconnects.
Like we said, that we're coming back to what we've done before. It's the pendulum; it swings back and forth.
Well, but you brought up a point, right? We're like there's an appetite now, an increasing appetite for this material, but maybe not as many people to churn it out. But that's like it's like a lot of labor these days. People want jobs, but in the most menial stuff and seemingly the lowest paid, and there's not enough people for them, right? So, and maybe that's part of the tipping point, I guess, or that discussion and how we reach.
So you're saying the AI bots are coming for fast food?
Well,
but I say that.
But who can afford it? Right?
I'm not sure if they do it anymore. But do you remember? I think it was like 2 years ago or whatever. It was Freshie, and they have different things in different malls and stuff like that, and they serve food in food courts and things like that. And so obviously you have the normal person there, you can order or do whatever. But then they put in this thing where it was like a register, except you're looking at a video and you're video conferencing with someone in Central America to take your order and do all this stuff, which is kind of like, really? And that's real. I'm not making that up. Maybe they've tested it and it didn't work out for them. I haven't seen it when I passed any near us, but I know they were testing that out a couple of years ago or a few years ago, and there was a big story on that.
That feels very extra especially because you could just easily set up like the register at the front where you just make your own order.
Or set up a virtual assistant. I wonder if that's where they were going to go to in the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Create their own VTuber.
And I've always been leery of like this whole self-checkout thing. Not that I'm suspicious, but I guess I do find it mildly annoying in the sense that it's like, why am I putting in the work to make my own order? But I guess how is that any different from you doing it like within the confines of your own home if you did home delivery? But I think having the option there is fine. But I know
just a lot of them started to go a little too heavy into it. But yeah, no, it's funny because some of them have reversed course and just taken them all out because they realized it was a big issue for people stealing from them. People were ticked off because of not being able to get things done, and then maybe there's just one person to help you out, and they're trying to help all these people going through like this herding of cattle situation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Like for me, I always try to determine what will be the fastest for me. So while generally I do think, I don't want to put in as much work on principle to check myself out for groceries, but I acknowledge that if I want to save time and I only have 2 items and self-checkout is a shorter line, then I'll do it.
Yeah.
You know what you need to do, Kevin, right? We need to get a bot, an AI bot, just like they use for buying video game consoles to buy our groceries now. And just scan it in there.
It's one of those cases of, okay, people like to have it both ways. Like there is a both wayism in that I feel too. But the discussion continues, right? The discussion continues, and you're right, James. All of this somehow does intertwine itself. But we'll just keep going. We just keep trucking and watch as it goes along, and see if we can manage it, I guess. You know.
Then the question is, how long is this story going to have legs? Is the other question, right?
Yeah. On the topic of Oda. Yeah, and how long will this story have legs? Is 15 minutes almost up? Sorry. Yeah, I mean, go ahead, James.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking to Kevin. No, I was just like, and yeah, I was talking regarding the Studio Ghibli, the AI stuff. And then the question is, what's the next thing? Because it's like, you never know. As we know, this thing has been developing and it's still developing for AI. And it's going to be interesting to see how our world is changing. It's just a matter of how we make it change and we change with it, right?
Well,
because at the end of the day, we're the ones in control, so to speak, the humans. You would think.
For now, yes.
Okay. It reminds me. Just quickly. It reminds me of this article I read from an ex-Google higher up. How the types of jobs that might be needed will be changing, in the sense that, like, they probably need fewer. Not they. I mean, just like he suspects that society or just the tech industry will need fewer front-end developers, and they'll want more people who can write, because they can use their writing skills to improve AI.
Yeah, they were talking about coders, I know, as well, that they would need fewer coders, even though, remember, they were heavy into saying we need to train everyone to be coders, right?
Yeah, basically, so that they can, write to teach, write code to teach, but the student being the AI itself. Look, Oda. On the topic of Ichiro Oda, apparently, he didn't have much. He didn't see much for the Ghibli art. Those comic book. That's according to comicbook.com. You've tarnished Ghibli, but at the same time, Ichiro Oda creates AI. According to Internet Movie Database, Ichiro Oda creates AI generated song for One Piece, and fans react to that. So, well, I mean, this is the artist anyway, right? So, if the artist is willing, does it to enhance their work, okay. I guess okay. Or to enhance or assist their work. Okay. So that's that. One last thing, and this is just as a point to move on, and then we can actually talk about the AI bots who will buy the next thing we'll talk about. I've said this before, and I guess I'll just leave that thought there again. Conan O'Brien, when talking to Hillary Clinton on his podcast some years back, and they were talking in the frame of Hillary's loss in 9 years ago in the presidential election. Conan just used the phrase, technology right now, technology is at the point where or more like it has evolved faster than humanity. And that's why that's the root. And I believe it sounds like that's the root of a lot of the issues we're at now. The technology outpacing and being further ahead than humanity or its evolution. There was a line also in Vandred. I think it was Vandred that made me think and kind of relates here. And I'm hoping I'm not playing truthiness when I say it. Could the downfall of humanity begin when humanity realizes, if there's a point where humanity realizes it can no longer evolve? And that's, I think that's part of the fears, part of the discussions and part of our fears with this discussion. So just a thought.
Well, we'll see how long people keep an eye on the pulse, because remember, people used to fear Dolly the sheep and cloning and then genetic modification. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And once again, technologies, or the evolution of technology outpacing and being further ahead than the evolution of humanity.
And some people, as we know across the world now, have shorter attention spans. So that's another, I guess, wrinkle in it all as well.
Mm-hmm. On that note, and on that note, let's lighten it up a little bit. But I know it will have our own.
You don't want to switch it up,
so to speak, right? Maybe it's time to. Okay, well, we talked about. Well done, by the way, James. And I know we've been trying to transition to this point. Yeah. Okay.
We're going to turn fun into unfun.
Yeah, we will. I think we will as we talk about. Okay, so the more detailed unveiling of the Switch 2 happened this week with a Nintendo Direct. I believe it was on Thursday. Was it?
No, it was on Wednesday.
It was on Wednesday. Oh, April 2nd.
And you don't even care about the week before where they had a regular Switch Direct and at the end announced another app no one's ever going to use in Nintendo today. And the only thing we got from that is the live action Zelda release date, which is in 2 years.
No, James, that Direct mattered because we got the Rido remaster.
I waited before I want to pre-order it because I've heard it's gonna be on Switch 2. They said there's gonna be a Switch 2 version. It's coming out in June, so I'm hoping that I can get a Switch 2 version of it, since it sounds like that was confirmed by Atlas. But yeah, that was a late PS2
so there'll be both
game.
Versions? There'll be a Switch and a Switch 2 version?
Yep, that's what it sounds like.
Oh.
So they have Switch 2, PS4, PS5, and I think there is even an Xbox version, I think, too. I could be wrong.
Okay. And they're doing the collectors through limited run games as
expected. So a lot of that's been interesting because the most recent one they did was Hawaii Yakuza. That was in February, and a lot of those ones that they still do through regular retail here in Canada, they've done them through Video Games Plus. But as you mentioned, Kevin, the last few months, all those Yakuza games, it feels like they've been re-releasing those PS4 games for Yakuza through limited run, through just a regular edition and these ridiculous special editions. But it sounds like the digital future is upon us because Sega seems to be taking some of those Atlas and Sega games. And remember, they used to do the physical edition, have a retailer exclusive. I think they don't think there's any worth
of it, and they don't want as much stock and stuff like that. So they're like, okay, we're going to go to the boutique limited run and just run whatever people want and stuff like that. So it's interesting how their business has evolved and stuff like that. Is from these indie and niche type of studios to some of the bigger studios are like, oh, we can get in on this too. And we've
They're
seen that with
offloading
other
the
bigger
risk.
publishers too.
They're offloading the risk essentially.
Well, okay, so let's backtrack and we'll say, okay, yeah, we got more details on the Switch 2. James,
that just came to mind actually.
James and Kevin are the bigger Switch fans. So
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's funny if you want to.
Finally tipping.
Before we get into the Switch thing, there's actually a funny one I'll tell you guys about, and it was early this week on the Monday. I saw another Video Games Plus Canadian exclusive, and it was it was Lunar Remastered Collection for PS4 and Switch.
I did see that.
And that one's interesting from Gun Ho. I've talked to you guys about. So that it sounds like there's going to be a special edition from Limited Run, but the regular edition, they had just said it was going to be on Amazon. So it sounds like it's going to be in Amazon in the States, and then VGP is taking orders right now in Canada to only Canadian addresses, which I decided to order, even though it's more expensive than the digital. It's like $79.99 compared to $66.99 digitally. But the other thing that's interesting is, well, first of all, they chose a release date of April 18th, which is Good Friday. So it'll be interesting to see if it gets to us on release date. But at least in Canada, we might get it faster than those in the States, because they said for that particular title, Lunar, they're not going to start taking physical orders for the regular edition on Amazon.com till release day on the 18th, which is silly. Like, never seen that before. But the interesting thing is, sorry?
No. I'm just reacting to what you just mentioned. Yeah.
But the interesting thing for them is with the Falcon collaboration for Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky first chapter, they've already got them. It's on pre-order and stuff like that. So that'll come out likely at the end of September. And hopefully that one, it's like rights the ship and they're starting to move things. And that one's across the board, like from different retailers and stuff like that. And maybe it just took time, because I know before they did this, they had done Grandia, and that one was only through limited runs. So, but I hope they do well. But I hope they do well on Lunar, and hopefully maybe we get it sooner. But if not, that's okay. And then, so I'm gonna enjoy that on Switch. And then the first chapter for Trails in the Sky, I'm hoping to enjoy that in September. But it's going to be interesting for that Trails in the Sky, just to tell you guys, because NIS America this week is, well, the newest Trails in the Sky, the last one that Falcom did, which was last year. So they finally caught up, which, if you know Trails in the Sky, to think they've caught up is ridiculous, because it's like such an expansive series. But the one that came out last year in Japan in September, they're going to release it this fall. And so I'm praying both of those games, even though one's from NIS, the newest one, and then the remake of the first Trails in the Sky game from Gung Ho, don't cannibalize each other, because Trails in the Sky first chapter September, the other one they've just announced it for fall, which could be October. But who knows? Maybe people have more hours in the day to play than the rest of us, right?
Yeah. Okay, so there's on upcoming releases, and then the big release
that comes to mind too. That James, my Persona 4 Golden Midnight Edition finally began to ship from Limited Run.
Yeah,
as well.
So that was a special edition. So when you order like from Limited Run, anyone getting those Yakuza special editions or the Sega ones, it's going to take a while, because there's so many more parts in those special editions to ship. But I can tell you, they have gotten better at communicating compared to other limited sites. I'm looking at you, Strictly Limited. Even though they love their Japanese games, they have been an SH show for trying to get things out the door. They have things that have been delayed for over 2 years, but at least Limited Run, I know it's going to be a year delay at the most or something like that. But the regular editions for Limited Run, where it's just the game physically, they've relatively been good at getting those out relatively within 6 months or stuff like that. Like I have one coming out that they just sent me an email yesterday saying I'm getting the Cosmic Fantasy Collection 2 probably shipping out later this month, and I ordered that probably end of last year, like maybe end of November, December or something like that. So they take the orders, and then once they stop the prayer, that's when they get in the process of getting them manufactured. So the regular editions, if you just want that, it isn't as bad. Now, sometimes if you don't want to order from them directly, you have to wait a bit longer, because then they send them out to some exclusive retail partners like Video Games Plus here in Canada and PNP Games here in Canada and stuff like that. So you still have those options.
Okay. Do you want to get to the Switch too? We should.
Oh man.
Well,
I guess the thing is, do we want to talk about the good stuff first, which was the Direct? Did you guys watch the Direct?
I've been watching bits and pieces of it through the morning. I haven't seen it fully.
I did not watch the Direct. I just read news articles after the fact.
Okay.
Yeah, like
what's the reaction so far then? Especially from you two, since you're two of the bigger Switch users amongst us.
Like I think I kind of when I watched it, and I know other people watched it, definitely a lot more hype, excitement than the regular Switch Direct the week before. So it definitely brought it and stuff like that for a lot of things. We knew there were going to be things like you're seeing on screen right now with the fan, where it's like explaining some things and stuff like that. In regards to starting off and stuff like that, they how do I explain? The other thing that I noticed is when it was live, because so many people wanted to watch the stream broke at one point, I heard, and stuff like that. So basically it was stuck on screen, but we could hear them talking about other games and stuff like that. It was third-party games. So it was something else. And luckily it caught back up, but that could have been disaster for them and stuff like that. But there were other disasters to be had. So let's talk about the big thing, which is the games, right? So what we saw in the Direct was a lot of games. They brought out Mario Kart World first, and that's the first thing they showed. And it was, it looks like they really thought about that game, because let's remember, Mario Kart 8 was on basically Wii U.
Yep.
Wii U was a disaster. And then Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with all the DLC and stuff like that came out basically in the launch window for the Switch in 2017. And then basically a few years later, they added a booster pack with all these different courses and stuff like that on it, which was, I think, good value and stuff like that. So they just
booster packs.
Yeah, they extended the life for like a couple of years, it felt like.
Well, it seems
not even a couple of years, James. They extended it for 8 years.
I was about to say they made it work for the generation. They made it. They kept it fresh for the entire Switch generation. That's the impression I got.
I had to go out of my way to buy that UAE release where all the booster courses are on the cartridge.
And I you know, it's funny. I've seen certain stores selling that, and then I've seen them selling the Japanese Breath of the Wild where it has on the cart the DLC. Like, it's crazy that certain other regions got this, but we didn't. But anyway, that beside the point. Mario Kart, like, people were wondering, okay, what are they going to do for the next game after 8? Because we've been through the formula, just like with Zelda and stuff like that, right? And it looks like, obviously, they went to the quote-unquote open world, as open as they could be, right? With Mario Kart. So from what I've seen, and I watched the Treehouse Live, so I've watched some of the streams. So they showed the Treehouse Live was on Thursday and Friday in New York City when they were doing those New York City events. They had one in Paris. But it was showing the different things, obviously the regular races and that. We're seeing the map right here. So you can go around in free roam mode and go around the map and explore the different courses and stuff like that. You have the regular Grand Prix like we always had. Then we have these other ones. You saw that map where you can do one where basically you're going from course to course and it's saying, oh, 20 people, these are the only people that are going to move on at this point. So it's like almost like an outrun rally where we're trying to get from one end of the map here to the next part of the map, and we're going through like 4 different courses, and between the courses we're actually driving to those next courses. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, you just finished this course, we're just going to put you into a loading screen and send you to the next course, right? It's like we're going through the world and stuff like that. There's definitely an evolution, it feels like, comparatively to what they've ever had. It doesn't feel like Double Dash, for example, which was, they had an experiment, and I don't think that one worked, but I'm sure they're still fans of that.
Oh my
World
god, I
Tour,
love Double
Knockout
Dash.
Tour. Do you think Knockout Tour will be an interesting game mode?
Yeah, so yeah, the knockout mode will be interesting, and exploring the world and stuff like that will be interesting. I think all of it kind of ties into the next point they made a point of, which was their chat functionality and stuff like that. See, free roam mode is what they called it, as we saw it on the screen. But the chat functionality, and they used this game to promote that and stuff like that. It was interesting because we kind of got an idea that because they had the C button, then they took the C button off in the first trailer, and now it's obviously back on there. So it was always the C button. So they're talking about chat and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, thank goodness, they're kind of sort of back to what all the other players are doing. You know what I mean? Because let's be honest, no one was using the bloody app to do voice chat on the Switch. No one was doing that. People were probably on Discord. No doubt in my mind, they were on Discord. But with that, like, I kind of gave a bit of a pass on the Switch because they were in a very bad place with the Wii U, and they had to pivot. And so they basically took something off the shelf from NVIDIA, like NVIDIA Shield type technology, to make the Switch and stuff like that. And they did do a bit of massaging, but they had to work with what they had. You know what I mean? So it's like, I give them a bit of that, but I'm still like, I was like, if they didn't get it right this time, it's like, what are you doing? Why aren't you with what the rest of the industry is doing?
The other part of it was, yeah, okay, they were in a rough position at the beginning of the Switch generation, but they're in a better position now. So you're right, they had to make that functionality ready for Nintendo Prime Time, right?
Oh my God, just watching this, it's like, what are you doing in tabletop mode trying to talk to your friends? Like, I would not use that in tabletop mode or in handheld. I'd be using that on the screen because, as you can see, you have, and to explain to those listening, you have the main screen of what you're playing, and then below your friends, you could have like 4 people there, and it could just be their face. So they have a camera accessory where if you want to show your face, you can do that, or you can show your avatar and stuff like that. And this one, they have an avatar we're seeing right now, but you can show your gameplay in that as well. So if we're playing the same game like Mario Kart, basically we can see some different things. Or if we're doing Link, the Four Swords game for Game Boy Advance, which is on the GBA Virtual Console, we could see that all at the same time. But the other thing is, as you saw in some of the things, is you could be chatting with your friends but playing different games and stuff like that. So you don't have to play the same game. So it sounds like it's a hub for those that are either your family or friends on the Nintendo Switch. I haven't seen anything about how far they go, but I think it's just for people who are on your friends list. I don't think they allow anyone outside that to basically connect with you and stuff like that, because
That would
it would just be a minefield.
It would be asking for trouble. I could tell that.
Well, remember PictoChat and stuff like that, and they got in trouble with that.
Yeah.
And that was, and it's like, but they're in the same, they had to be similarly in the same room to do PictoChat for the DS. It's like, it was,
because you knew somebody was gonna be a sicko and figure out a way to be weird with it. Yeah.
But
well,
yeah, some of it, looking at this.
But you figure there's a certain inevitability with being weird here at some point, right?
Well, that's what I was thinking too. So it'll be interesting to see how well the chat runs. I think there's some people saying about game chat that it probably might be a bit choppy. I'm sure it's not going to be the highest fidelity and stuff like that, as long as it doesn't affect you in the gameplay. That's the important thing. But people, when you see the people and they have the camera and they're showing their faces and that, I know some people said they were having Uno flashbacks from Xbox 360 and stuff like that.
Well, the
But that
Kinect.
one was more open form that I think you didn't have to just be on the friends and stuff. But they said, yeah, people are still going to do stupid SH on the camera probably and showing things they maybe shouldn't be showing.
Well, there you go.
Oh,
So there's some
yeah,
debate.
because these camera accessories have never really stuck.
Well, okay. First of all, is this camera supposed to be strictly proprietary, and will it? I'm
they
gonna
got
guess.
the parental controls in the video.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot. They let you know. It's like, don't worry, Bowser's going to protect your kids.
Yeah, kind of like a sheep and wolf.
But yeah, it's interesting. So that actually, so Game Chat, after they did Mario Kart, Game Chat was the second thing. So this seems to be the big thing. And they talked about, so they have a developer interview on the Nintendo site going into this and a few other things we're going to talk about. But obviously with the pandemic and all this other stuff, it was one thing that I guess kind of inspired them a bit on how they went about with Game Chat. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I think a lot of people will still be on their Discord servers and things like that, but it'll be interesting. I think more people can get on board with this because it's on the system instead of sending people to a bloody app on their phone, because no one was going to do that. Let's be real.
It's a paid service, though. Initially, it's at a point it'll be you have to have an account. And
well, I see. This is what
right?
I don't understand. You need to pay for the Nintendo Online, either the $20 US or the $50 US for the expansion pack. You have to pay for that anyway to get online, just like any of the other services. So I don't understand this BS they're talking about being free till March 2026. It makes no sense. So how exactly, like, what are they talking about? I still have to play to be online and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So that part I didn't quite understand. But as we see here, they actually did show the system. So bigger screen. We talk about, this is where it's interesting because this shows us why the price might have been higher and stuff like that, and we'll get into that later.
Right.
But
it is why the price is higher.
Who's going to buy a Switch if we have a recession, right?
So 1080p screen, 120 frames per second, like VVR, like they put a lot of stuff in the screen. People like didn't think Nintendo was gonna, like vivid LCD HDR support, a lot of things in the screen people didn't think Nintendo was gonna do and stuff like that. Like they were thinking, okay, yeah, they're gonna make the jump in that, but they want to still be affordable and all this other stuff, the magnetic Joy-Cons, all that. Like they put a lot of tech in here that basically you can say, okay, I can see why basically it's a little more expensive and stuff like that. And it's interesting because it's like they're saying, okay, we want to still be able to maybe find a way to get some of those ports of those PS5 and Xbox Series X games at lower fidelity and stuff like that, kind of like what Xbox does with their, or Microsoft for the Xbox does with their lower end Xbox. That's $400 US, like it'd be comparable to that. But it's interesting. We see the mouse controls, so they're adding a bit of that. So that'll be intriguing to see how they put that in, because in the direct they talk about basically Metroid Prime 4 using that. They talk about third-party developers using that with Civilization, adding that in and stuff like that.
So
and
my question is, for that mouse functionality, do you have to use it against a table, or will it I just have to position the controller downwards and it senses it?
So this is, it's like a traditional mouse.
So this is, well, no, you can use that on a table, but they said you can't use it. So if you were sitting down, right, Kevin, on a couch, you can use it pretty much on most surfaces. They said you can't use it against your skin. So if you're wearing shorts, don't use it on your leg. But if you have pants, they said you should be able to use it on your pant legs and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting.
But it'll be interesting to see how well that works. So it's another one
natural,
thing where we'll have
though. I feel like you would need to have like a hard surface for it to make more sense to use it that way. Like it's nice, but you kind of have to think about how you're going to use it.
And the other thing is this. So, you know, how you take them off magnetically and stuff like that. I think if you were using it with the split Joy-Cons and then using mouse functionality, and they've shown it where you can use both Joy-Cons as mouse controllers at the same time, I think you know how for the Switch they have the strap accessory and you put that on the Joy-Cons when you take them off the Switch. I think they probably have something like that. So hopefully it doesn't do anything when you're using the mouse functionality. You know what I mean? If you didn't have the strap on it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's without it, you have some of the buttons on the top and stuff like that. So I think you'd still need to use the strap, but they're showing the dock. So the dock is a bit beefier. It looks like we have some cooling and stuff like that because they're allowing us now to go to 4K. I think they haven't explicitly said it. I think NVIDIA has basically said it because they were talking about some of the specs, but they said for NVIDIA 10 times more powerful than the Nintendo Switch. DLSS should be in there, so that should help it for some game makers in docked playing on the TV that might say, hey, I'm at 1080p, but I'm going to use the AI upscaling to get to 4K and stuff like that. But
so 4K is docked mode only then?
Yes, obviously docked mode is where 4K is only, and basically 1080p is the maximum for portable mode, and that's why we said 1080p screen.
I grew up with that.
But it's the others that were interesting, like on the screen, obviously you need the proper TV for the other stuff as well. You need the 4K TV, you need the HDR support, all that stuff. But on the system itself, portably, you have the HDR support, you have the screen, you have the 120 frames per second, which is incredible and stuff like that. And then
it's too big on that guy.
I know, but and then here's the other thing. So we're watching now. They got to Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, and we thought that was going to be the pack-in game, just like Astrobot was for the PS5. Guess what? They said, "Oh, this is a played game that's going to basically introduce you to this Nintendo Switch 2 and the Joy-Con 2 and stuff like that." And they showed it at Treehouse Live, and I'm like, a paid experience, my buns. Even if they sell it at $10 US, they haven't put a price on this. I just don't know how you do that. Like, it's just like, and I think Kit and Krista, they used to work at Nintendo. They're on YouTube now, but they basically said, like, if Reggie Fils-Aimé had seen this, he would have been like on Japan. And even though, yes, he is in Nintendo America and NCL has the final choice, like Nintendo Japan and Kyo has the final choice, he would fight them and say, just like he did for Wii Sports.
That's the thing.
Just like he did for pricing for 3DS, and say, guys, this is a packing game. Just pack it in, throw it in digitally and stuff like that. There's no way we can sell this in any configuration. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because people don't tend to realize that Nintendo does not like to give away their games for free, because that's the thing. In Japan, you had to pay for Wii Sports in some way or another. And yes, Reggie Fils-Aimé fought for that for North America, because everywhere else did not have that packed in. The DS and 3DS didn't have any like free games to that scale, though, to my knowledge.
Yeah, they just have the fancy. They just have to have the fancier configuration.
I don't count Face Raiders as like a pack-in game of note in the same realm as like this and Wii Sports.
Mm-hmm.
But it's as we go through some of the other stuff, like they had some interesting things they went through. Like they talked about through local play game sharing, and they did that with Clubhouse games and stuff like that. We've seen that before on the DS and stuff like that, with basically Mario Kart DS and with Clubhouse games. And Mario Kart DS, it was like you can only play as Shy Guy and stuff like that if you don't have the cart and stuff like that. But it'll be interesting. It probably won't be many games, but that'll be interesting to see. We had a few things about the memory, as we saw there, which is Micro Express SD is going to be what we use for memory on the Switch 2. And that's great because load times, and they showed it on Treehouse on Friday, Thursday, it's going to be great. The only problem is this, the caveat they put, and that is all our games and all that stuff on the Switch, we're using regular micro SD. We can't take that micro SD we have in our Switch, put it in our Switch 2. Basically, it's only micro SD Express that we can use for Nintendo Switch 2. So we're starting over again with memory and stuff like that. They only have so much of those micro SD cards out there on the market right now because this Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be the first mass consumer market adapting it and stuff like that.
Wow.
So I think the biggest one they have is similar to what they have for memory in the system, which is, I think,
256.
256. Yeah, 256.
Yeah.
At least they gave us 256 in for the onboard memory because Nintendo, compared to others, has cheaped out and stuff like that. The only good thing is now third parties, they always make bigger games and stuff like that. Nintendo always optimizes to the extreme, and we have seen some of the game file sizes. They're still optimizing real well. So 256 isn't that bad, but you still are going to want to invest in a new micro SD card at some point, probably in year one and stuff like that.
How many did you get for your Switch? Just for reference.
Only 2. So because they didn't have the 1 terabyte cards in year one and stuff like that, I was rocking a 400 gigabyte SD card for the longest time. And then I think around the pandemic or so, they finally got the 1 terabyte cards. So probably 4 years ago, I invested in a 1 terabyte SD card for my Nintendo Switch and stuff like that. And I've had that ever since. And that's been more than enough.
I just want to know because of, as I said, I literally have not held a Switch.
But they said that it is up to 2 terabytes for the micro SD Express, but it'll be a while before we get there. They haven't got I don't think there is a 1 terabyte SD Express card on the market.
I still use the original one that came with the Switch.
So you haven't really gone whole.
Yeah, it was only like 32 gigs or something like that. It wasn't that much.
Because I haven't gone through nearly as many games as James has, and James doesn't really download a lot of stuff either.
Well, I actually see the thing is I do download, but I'm not downloading anything that is physical, or I think I can get a physical copy of to basically not waste my space on my system. But I still am getting some indie games. Your mileage may vary on how big they are, but usually they aren't too big.
Yeah, for me, it's only the Picross series where I've had any sort of downloadable games on it.
Mm-hmm. So as we go through, the next thing they had talked about is they talked about some of the games, because there's a lot of rumors and stuff like that about remasters from original Nintendo Switch games. So this one has been tough because people have been trying to find information all week, and we're kind of getting a clearer picture, but we're going to have to see what happens. But they said some games are going to be a free update and stuff like that. And that was like Clubhouse Games, Super Mario 3D World, Bowser's Fury, Captain Toad. I think the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet were even included in that. But sounds like some of those are free. But
what's the update for Scarlet and Violet, though?
Probably to actually make it run better. That's probably the key. Just like probably the one for Pokemon A and Z that releases the end of the year, it'll probably make it run better as long as Game Freak can actually make it run on a modern system.
Because that is unacceptable. And I've said this before on the podcast, but the way that game runs right now is unacceptable.
But on the video now, for those watching live, but those listening, we're actually seeing some of them now. So we just saw Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda Tear of the Kingdoms. Those ones are updates where basically they're adding the HDR. We actually have a stable frame rate and stuff like that at 60 frames per second. Even in the Korok Forest, we have like everything that you could want. Like you can go up to 4K basically in docked mode and stuff like that, 1080p in portable mode. But that one's interesting where those ones for Breath of the Wild, it is a paid upgrade. Some have been saying $10 US if you want to keep it. But if you have the Nintendo Online expansion pass, they're giving you those upgrades for free if you're subscribed. And it's funny now, I'm looking at that too. They had another app they announced while they were announcing these remasters, and that was the Zelda Notes app, which is supposedly going to come out. And that one just makes me laugh watching it on screen now. So yeah, you can send your creations, vehicles and stuff like that, and Tears of the Kingdom. But in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you can basically have a map. It can help you explore, and it can almost act as a navigator basically through the world, which is kind of weird to say the least.
That is a little weird, yeah.
But I'm not sure how people are going to use that app, but it's at least it is what it is, and even on the phone. But it'll be interesting to see, like for the remasters and all that. That's interesting on that front. We'll come to the physical in a sec, but right now on screen we have Kirby and the Forgotten Land. So Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and then Mario Party Jamboree. Unlike the ones for Zelda and stuff like that, or the free ones, these remasters actually have new game content exclusive to the Nintendo Switch 2. So because of that, guess what? It's not a $10 upgrade. It's probably a $20 upgrade based on what we're seeing for the physical prices of those remasters. And for those, they're getting new content. That's Kirby and the Forgotten Land and Mario Party Jamboree. And they showed some of those at Treehouse Live on Thursday, Friday, if you want to see them for Kirby and for Mario Party Jamboree. Whether people are going to get on board with those new, like the new content and stuff like that, we'll see. But those ones, unlike the ones where it's just aesthetics, there is no free upgrade path for Nintendo Online users for the expansion pack, like I said before, right? So that adds some fun confusion to the mix. And then the one that they had brought back, as we saw earlier, the thing, and they showed it right here, Pokemon ZNA or ZNA is going to have Nintendo Switch version, Nintendo Switch 2 version at the end of the year. Metroid Prime 4 that we saw in both directs is going to have a Switch edition and a Nintendo Switch 2 edition. So, and the Switch 2 edition for Metroid Prime 4 is going to be interesting too. They didn't say much about Pokemon, but it could be similar. But Metroid Prime 4 is going to have performance mode and the quality mode, kind of like what we saw with PS5. So you could do 4K, 60 frames per second, all this other jazz on the dock. Or if you want, you could do 1080, 120 frames per second, stuff like that. So it's interesting. They are giving you some choices, kind of like PS5, which I wasn't expecting. And then that's just for Switch 2 for Metroid Prime 4. And then they also have added some mouse controls and stuff like that. So that'll be really intriguing to see. The last thing about these remasters is, and this just came out over the weekend, is some of them are getting physical editions. So the free ones, it doesn't sound like they're getting physical editions, the free updates. But Legend of Zelda, those two games getting physical editions, Metroid Prime 4, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Mario Party Jamboree, all of them are getting physical editions. Some of them are going to be at $69.99 US. Some of them are going to be at $79.99 US and stuff like that. So some people obviously are taking offense to that and stuff like that. But to add more offense to it is the cards they're using for these. We're going to talk about the cards later about some other games. But for these remasters, it has been found out, we're going to have to wait and see if this turns out to be true, because there's still debate about whether it's true or not, is the cards they have in these remastered games, like for Zelda, for Kirby, for Mario Party and stuff like that, are not actually Switch 2 cards.
Yes.
They're actually Switch 1 cards, and then there is a download code for the upgrade and stuff like that, similar to what we've seen with Elden Ring on PS5 and Xbox and other games before. But that is absolutely a disappointment at those prices I just said, if that's how they're
Yep.
doing it. I want it on a Switch 2 card and everything on that card, Nintendo. Like,
Yep.
if you're not doing that,
100%.
I'm not gonna pay. I'm not gonna go that route. Like, I'm a physical guy. I like to get physical games, but if it's not all there on the card and on a Switch 2 card, I'm not buying it, because the value isn't there too. Because when you go to resell, it's basically you're reselling a Switch 1 game all over again. You know what I mean? The value is
Exactly.
so.
Exactly.
When and I guess to your point, would the code be specific to the account, or can it be is it transferable?
No, it's like all the other codes, Mike, you see in
It
these
likely
games
will
and
be
stuff
the
like that
account.
in Elden Ring. You only use it one time and then basically it's done. So basically when you're reselling, all you're reselling is whatever was on the card and stuff like that. So it's basically, if I had Breath of the Wild and I went to resell it, I'd probably use that code to upgrade it for my Switch too. So guess what? All I'm selling you is nice little Switch 2 package, but with the Switch 1 card of Breath of the Wild. That's all you're getting.
And this
So
is
whatever the
why,
price is now for those, that's what you're probably getting.
and this is why I did not buy any of those compilation releases. So that's why I did not buy the Resident Evil Revelations release. That is why I did not buy the Metal Gear Solid Collection 1 release. And that's also why I did not buy the Final Fantasy 10 and 10-2 release for North
They also
America.
had that for I think Mega Man collection and the Mega Man X collection. They
Mhm.
only had one of the collections on the card and stuff like that. So those become a bit of a problem. Some of the Capcom collections and Konami collections have gotten better, but yeah, we've seen it from all sorts of third-party publishers before. But to see this, like, this basically says to me, if I'm already on the expansion pass, so I'm basically going to say, if that's what it is, I'm just going to take the free route for the Zelda games, and then depending on these ones that add content, kind of like a DLC update, I'll see what the price is. If it is going to be that $20 USD extra, I might consider getting it, and obviously I would download, because there's no value, because basically they're giving you a download code.
So for me, in this specific situation, so I have not opened my copy of Breath of the Wild yet. It is a revision 3 cart, so it has all the patch updates, but it does
And that's
not
the
have the extra
question.
content.
It should have all the most up-to-date patches, you would think, given that they have done that with other Switch carts before. So that may be a small silver lining, but it's a very minimal silver lining. And then the other question is, do they have the DLC on the cards as well? That's another question, since a lot of regions like us in North America never got those on a card, like Japan, for example, for Zelda, for
It's
the Breath of the
very
Wild.
case specific. So specifically for Breath of the Wild, to my knowledge or to my recollection, the DLC for Breath of the Wild is still not on any of the North American carts. You still have to pay for that. But I believe it is only on the Japanese ones. So I have been contemplating whether I should look for a copy just for and then, deal with not having an English cover. Scarlet and Violet, the UAE version pulled through. Actually, it existed in North America proper as well. But for the first, when the DLC came out, because they wanted to put that game out before Christmas, so only the first half of the DLC was on the cart, and then the second half was not. But later, it did get reissued where they were both on the cart. And that took some time to procure, and VGB was able to reach an agreement to sell those updated revision 4s.
Yeah, no, I've seen that they've obviously came over just like a few others, and they've been able to import some of the others, I know.
Metroid Dreads DLC is on the most updated cart because that was a free DLC. So Revision 4 Metroid Dreads have that free DLC. Arceus, Pokemon Legends Arceus, they had some sort of like small DLC that was free as well. Most updated carts have that one now. And then also there's another one that Pokemon Snap, I think, had some small, like somewhat more substantial like update / DLC. Only the most updated carts have that one too. VGP has since sold most of these. The only one I'm still chasing is actually the Pokemon Shining Pearl most updated revision, because with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, that game was virtually unplayable at launch, and you had to download like a 2 gig patch. And those, like Brilliant Diamond had the more wider release for that, but Shining Pearl still is very difficult to find that updated cart for. For Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I also have not opened my copy of it yet.
I've only played the demo of it, but I know it was fun to play the demo.
Yeah,
so that's
like,
what I'm considering.
Do you want me to keep the
I
video
played my
running, by the
demo
way?
too. I
We can
played
keep
it with
the-
my niece when they did a Nintendo event in our area, and I like Kirby enough, so I did buy it when it went on sale. But now it's like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to open my copy. I'm just going to borrow it from the library, and then if they ever, I'm just going to pray for a revision cart, or like maybe they revise it at some point in the future, because. And then that way, if I do sell my Switch copy, it's going to retain some value, because, yeah, I don't like the fact that, like, I want everything in a cart too, James, because you know me. I'm also physical above all else in almost every circumstance. So for me,
Man,
my
we're
only
in Yakuza now.
Yeah, they are.
my only exceptions to the physical debate is if I was to actually play an online game, because I absolutely refuse to pay to play online. So if I was actually into games like, say, Call of Duty, that's where I would cave and consider getting a digital copy.
But thinking about, we might as well move along, or else we'll never continue, because there's the other things. But
Yeah, that
we had a buttload.
Yakuza,
We had a.
that
Sorry?
Yakuza better be on cart. I'm gonna be so pissed if it's not on cart.
We had. Well, you know who's going to be selling that game? It's going to be limited run. I guarantee you they're going limited run. If they went every other Yakuza game through the PS4 and all that stuff, and yes, they did the most recent Switch one they released, which was
Kiwami.
Yeah. So it's probably going to a limited run. They're probably not going to do it themselves and stuff like that. And it's probably going to be similar to what they did for Zero for PS4. But
because it's an old game, yeah, it's not a new game.
the thing is, I understand for the Switch ones, or the Switch 2 ones in this case of Zero, but I still don't understand. They already have released those PS4 copies for Yakuza before, so I don't understand why they went to limited run to re-release them again and stuff like that for the standard ones. The collector's editions, I kind of understood, because it's like, oh, I really love this game, so I'm going to get this collector's edition with all this fun stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably part of the negotiation, where they were probably forced to.
There's at least on some Facebook boards, you know, Facebook is being what it is these days. People are asking, okay, is it worth trying to get the director's cut among diehard Like a Dragon fans?
So they said, since we're going to the third party games and other games, as we said, Yakuza 0 director's cut does have some additional content, they were saying. I think they said they also have a dub. Was there an English dub for the original one? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
No, there wasn't.
It sounds like there's an English dub in there as well and stuff like that. So it probably, there's some content to be had there, and it sounds like it is exclusive for the moment to Switch 2. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it does. I think they said they were happy with how Kiwami did. So I'm guessing they probably, that made them feel good for doing this on Switch 2 and just adding some cut content and things like that.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad it is, because I constantly recommend it. I recommend that game, and
But
I've told Kevin as much, right? I mean, if you see it come out there, if you see it come out on a Switch or a Switch 2, sure, it's an easy recommendation. And it is, plotline, the beginning.
But we'll see what happens for physicality for a lot of these third-party games. But to go through a lot of the other stuff here, I'm just looking at right now. So there was another one other than that Welcome Center that was questionable from Nintendo. Nintendo was going to release Dragon Drive, which was basically wheelchair basketball or futuristic wheelchair basketball, and you're basically using the mice functionality. I think that one's destined to become another ARMS, which means it's not going to do too great, but we'll see what happens. Then we had the deluge of third parties. So things we had heard were likely coming. So Elden Ring is going to be on there. Split Fiction is going to be on there. Hogwarts Legacy is going to be on there. Hades 2, Street Fighter 6, the Tony Hawk Skater 3 and 4 is going to be on there. Hitman is going to be on there, and they even teased James Bond, the new game they're working on there. Cyberpunk 2077 is going to be on there, and supposedly it's only, I think, like a 7 or 9 month build. It's not going to be like the full on like what you got on the PS5 or Xbox Series X or on
But
high-end
it will
PCs.
all be on the cart.
But it's going to run, and it's going to actually have the DLC on there too, which was not on the PS4 and Xbox One copies. It was
Not
on
even
all the other
editions?
ones. Sorry?
Not even the Ultimate Editions?
Yeah, it was not. The DLC supposedly was not on for 2077 for the older generation, which was PS4 and Xbox One.
Because those they did re-release Cyberpunk on PS5, so that's why I was wondering if.
Well, that's why I'm saying
that
everything, all the new content for a lot of DLC and things like that went to the newer console so that you would upgrade, to PS5, to Xbox Series X, PC. Obviously, it's there and stuff like that, but it's going to be there for Nintendo Switch for Cyberpunk. And as you mentioned, Kevin, for this one, we can tell you that yes, it had been confirmed. They are going to have a card of it. And unlike any of the other third parties, which do shenanigans, which we're going to talk about soon, Cyberpunk is going to all be on the cart. And it sounds like the DLC is going to be on the cart. But we'll have to see when it releases how true that is. But they're going for the higher end cart that is more expensive to produce. I think it's like the 64 gig. Yep. Yeah, and very few use that. Yeah.
And then kudos to CD Projekt Red, because not that there's no precedent, because they were able to cram all of Witcher 3 into a 32 gig cart, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So I respect that. I would actually consider buying it at that point.
But as they said, like, obviously it's not going to be the full frames per second, all that, but it is basically what they said. It looks like the impossible ports people talked about on the Switch with Doom Eternal and all those other things. It's going to be one of those, and people probably have some fun who want to try it out on that. Probably not a game for me, but some other people enjoy it, and hopefully it inspires some others to come over. So that tells you there's a lot of power under the hood of this machine that we had talked about before, a lot more than what people thought it was going to be, and a lot more features to help these developers bring their games over. You know what I mean?
I would at least consider borrowing it from the library.
Anyway, so Civilization 7 we had talked about, and yes, that has mouse controls. Then they went back to Nintendo stuff. So Hyrule Warriors, they're doing a new Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, which is basically in the mode of Tears of the Kingdom. So it's a prequel to Tears of the Kingdom when Zelda is in the other timeline.
So that's how they're trying to convince or con Zelda fans into buying it. Because I know the Hyrule Warriors ones never as popular.
So this is interesting because this one is going to be on the Switch too. It's probably actually going to run, unlike the one, remember they did a Hyrule Warriors based on Breath of the Wild in that universe. It ran like a piece of garbage on the Switch.
Really?
Like if they were going to put a Switch 2 edition, you would have thought, I thought that's what they were going to say was Switch 2 edition of Breath of the Wild Hyrule Warriors game. No, it was a completely new game, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do the remaster because that one ran like garbage on the Switch, the Breath of the Wild Hyrule Warriors game. So it definitely needs a Switch 2 edition polish and stuff like that. And I guess if Age of Imprisonment sells, they might get that. Then they talked about the thing that had been highly rumored. People were saying, nah, it's not going to happen. But GameCube is coming to Nintendo Switch Online exclusively for Switch 2 if you have the expansion pack, which is the more expensive online subscription. So, yeah, and that's for the free updates for the Zelda games too, right? As I said, so if you have the higher expansion thing, you're going to get more stuff. So we see on here actually Soul Calibur. So launching on launch day is Soul Calibur, Wind Waker, F-Zero, and then they said Mario Strikers is going to come later. But they were playing that on Treehouse, and it looks like it's going to be fully featured. We'll see how they run once we get them. I know some people were hoping for Wind Waker for the Wii U HD version to come out instead. But it looks like there is some improvements under the hood and stuff like that for some of these GameCube games where they will be able to get to 4K, the resolutions and stuff like that. And for some of them, because it was in that weird transitionary period 20 years ago and stuff like that, some of them do support widescreen in the options and stuff like that. So you can add that for some of them. And
Soul Calibur 2 to be exact.
Yep. Well, I think F-Zero was another one. I love how they show you the other games, like the Chibi Robo, they said is going to come, Luigi's Mansion. Fire Emblem is a big one because Path of Radiance is quite expensive. So that'll be worth it for those people. But
my friend, I helped my friend sell his copy for like $320. That's how expensive it's gotten.
And as we saw on the screen right now, instead of playing with a Wavebird, obviously on launch day of Nintendo Switch 2, they're going to put up the Nintendo GameCube controller, which you can buy from them, just like you could buy the other controllers if you want to use them. So that'll go up on launch day on June 5th and stuff like that.
Do you need to have been a like Nintendo Switch Online user for a year or two to buy that GameCube controller? Like if you were to try and buy a Switch through them?
No, they all of those you just had to be a member. So I'm guessing you just have to be a member, and you can be just a member of the basic subscription model, which is $26.99 Canadian for us. So even if you're at the base model, you could still buy those, but you have to be a subscribed member of Nintendo Online at one of the modes to get that done.
Yeah, because I have an unused membership still that I need to use.
So then we got some other, like I know they added some other third-party games, like they had some sizzle reels, and then one of the funny thing I'll just mention for the sizzle reel is, yes, Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to be on there. Yes, they're bringing back Bravely Default, the first game, to the Switch on launch day, and then in the sizzle reel as well, they talked about other 2K games like wrestling. They talked about the EA Sports games. They talked about some other smaller games. So, of course, Hollow Knight, Silksong showed up for 1 second to appease some people with no release date. We'll just see if that comes out at some point. But,
and I'm expecting FF7 Remake Intergrade to not be all on cart.
Oh, there was Silksong for its 1 second. But there was a lot of Story of Seasons. Like there was a lot of third-party support, it looks like. So it looks like they are there day one, because with the first Switch, there was a bit of time before all the third parties got on board and stuff like that, because they weren't sure, is Nintendo really going to make it this time? They're probably just going to go third party. Oh, we got Puyo Puyo is going to come as well. That's Puyo Puyo Tetris. but it looks like everyone, like from North America, Europe, Japan. Oh, look, Ubisoft's even trying to sell Star Wars Outlaws. That's probably going to fail.
I know.
Sorry, I just saw that
it,
on the screen, but I couldn't resist. Anyway,
and that'll likely be a game key card because Ubisoft has been known to. Ubisoft has been known to start doing code in boxes for Switch games.
Yep. Oh, there was Rido. Rido Remastered is on there too. Yep. And so we're seeing a lot of the Sega games. We're seeing a lot of the. Yeah. So we are seeing a lot of third-party support. Obviously, Fortnite. We're seeing that too. So a lot of third-party from everywhere. Arcade Archives is on there with Ridge Racer. Layton.
Oh, a new Layton. Oh, damn them.
So we're seeing across the globe, people are getting behind this day one. Now, some of them will be there within the launch window. Some of them probably closer to the holiday season, right? Which is October, November, December. But it looks like the third parties are all geared up, ready to go. We'll see how it is performance-wise for some of them. I think a lot of them will do well and stuff like that, and they'll still hit the same metrics as other systems. Other ones, those higher tier games like Cyberpunk, as we said, it's going to not be at the same level, but it's still going to be very much playable, very much enjoyable. And if you're not on those other ecosystems, something for some people to try and stuff like that. And then we got some big ones for the last ones to say, and that is the big third-party game that people were surprised about is we had another FromSoft game. So the Dusk Bloods, which it sounds like is a multiplayer game, but we're going to have to wait until they get on this game for FromSoft and Nintendo to tell us what this is about. But it's from FromSoft, Dusk Bloods, and they said it's going to launch in 2026. So we'll see how that goes. The next game, I'm not sure if they gave when they want to launch it, but Sakurai, he's all done with basically Smash. So guess what? They decided we're going to have a new Kirby Air Ride game because there hasn't been one since the GameCube, and that was the only one they ever made. So Kirby Air Riders is now in development, and that's going to come out. And then the final game. So we'll talk about the final game, which is a lot of people have been talking about Mario platformer and all this other stuff. It's going to come out at Christmas and it's going to sell all the Switch 2s and all this other nonsense. And so when I first saw this trailer, I was thinking Mario, but then once it came to the character, we see Donkey Kong and his new design. It's called Donkey Kong Bonanza, and that's not a typo. It's not Bonanza, the correct spelling. It's Bonanza, as in banana za. So basically, the Donkey Kong game is 3D world, open world, almost, it looks like, type Donkey Kong game. We haven't had that since Donkey Kong 64, so we're seeing it now on the screen. But Donkey Kong 64, a lot of people got it. They had to include the expansion pass for N64, but a lot of people, it didn't feel like, it just felt like a collectathon to the extreme, and the fun was sucked out of it, and that was my feeling. But this one, and we're seeing on screen, they're doing the callbacks with some 2D levels from Donkey Kong Country. We saw a minecart level, but in the Nintendo Treehouse Lives, they showed Donkey Kong Bonanza. Everything in these worlds, and you saw it in the first few things and see it there, we're collecting these bananas, but everything in the world is destructible, basically. Like, you see a rock wall, you're basically destroying and doing all sorts of things. Like, it feels very player mechanic based, kind of like how Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom felt. But this Donkey Kong game, it definitely feels like maybe Tokyo EAD is probably doing it. And it definitely looks like it's going to be fun. And then they had a release date, which we're going to see on the video here. It isn't going to be a holiday game. It's going to be in July. July 17th is when they're launching this one. And this one's interesting because now we get to go into the fun thing of prices and stuff like that. And this game, as I'm talking about right now, we'll start with Donkey Kong. Look at Donkey. He's just destroying things. Absolute mayhem. It just looks beautiful. There's so much expression in this Donkey Kong model too. The new model they have for Donkey Kong going to the classic look looks so expressive. And they started with that in the new Super Mario Brothers movie, remember? So this game for Donkey Kong is interesting. So its price was $69.99 US, which is what they did for Tears of the Kingdoms and what other publishers on other platforms like Xbox and PS5 have used, right?
Yep.
And that other thing is now Mario Kart World. You would think it's the same price, but people were trying to figure out these prices on basically when they did the Direct, because in the Direct, they gave the launch date for the system, which is, we have said just briefly, which was June 5th, the Thursday, but they gave no pricing for the systems, if there was any bundles, no prices for any of these games and stuff like that. So people had to find it on the official Nintendo website, which kind of was drip fed over Wednesday. And yes, people saw that for Donkey Kong Bonanza. Okay, it's $10 more. Nintendo's doing what everyone else is doing. They have quality games. But then the shit hit the fan, so to speak, when people saw Mario Kart World, because they had the site up. You had to scroll for the entire site, the entire Mario Kart World site, explaining all the features and all the nonsense to find the price at the bottom. And the price at the bottom was $79.99 USD, and other regions are other prices. They've been announced. Canada has not been announced, but if you base it on exchange, we're over $100 again, boys. Let's go. Let's go. It's the early 90s again. They had to put those extra chips in the carts and stuff like that, just like the good old days, and join the club.
And honestly, what better game for them to try and test the market with this increased pricing than Mario Kart, their best-selling game.
And it's had over like 60 to 70 million copies sold, let's not forget, of this game, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and stuff like that. And they already did the test run with Tears of the Kingdom at $69.99. So they have an idea of how that sold and how much revenue they got from that. So they know they can tinker. Now it's a question of how much more can we tinker. They know that people know
with.
Well, they know people know Nintendo is a brand. People know their brand. They know they're family friendly. They know that they're getting a quality game for certain series when they see the game come out. You know what I mean? And I'm talking about Mario. I'm talking about Zelda, those type of games, like the first party, like top tier games, Splatoon, Metroid. Like you know that they've worked on it, what to expect, that you're going to get the price of admission when you put it in the system. You also know you're not going to get microtransaction to the ends of the earth, just like some of these other things, or loot box to the ends of the earth, just like some of these other publishers and stuff like that. Yes, there might be a DLC pack later down the line, but usually they've been relatively priced right. They've been good for the quality and stuff like that. And that's for Xenoblade, that's for Splatoon 2 and 3 had that. Zelda Breath of the Wild had that, and they were priced right for DLC they released later and stuff like that. And even Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had DLC and stuff like that.
And furthermore too, anybody who's followed Nintendo game pricing for their first party titles will know that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe did not start going on sale until 2 years ago, give or take. So for maybe 6 years, Mario Kart had stayed at retail pricing. So you're not going to get a discount on that game anytime soon unless you buy it secondhand. Or if you do buy the bundle, that has the digital Mario Kart where you do save around $20, give or take, US. So that's the choice that people will have to make, especially if you want it physically.
It's like the old days, and it's going to obviously hurt maybe some other publishers too, because people will make choices in their entertainment about, okay, what am I not going to get? It's like, yes, I will decide to go and get this, but I'm not going to get these other games, or I'm not going to do something else and stuff like that. And it's not just video games, it could be shows, manga, what have you, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the price in that is interesting because obviously people, once they finally saw the pricing for that, and I will get back to another point, but
And
the consoles,
we'll try and wrap it soon. Yeah,
the consoles. Why don't we go to Canadian pricing? So American pricing was base console $450, $500 if you wanted to get the console with a digital edition of Mario Kart World. In Canada, we do have the price of the consoles. So it is $630 before tax or anything for the base console. And then I believe $700, so $699.99 for the console with the Mario Kart World digital edition. I believe that's correct, right, Kevin?
Yes.
So, and the thing is, I'm just getting the base console, and then I'm gonna get a physical edition of Mario Kart World. I know it's gonna cost more to do that, but I am standing by my principles. It is a bit of a discount getting that bundle, but they're just giving you a digital edition of the Mario Kart World game. But most people will probably make the choice and think that's fine.
Yeah, Mario Kart for me is I don't play Mario Kart very much if people aren't around. So I am totally content not buying Mario Kart right away.
Mahara, yeah, $699 for a handheld. That's with the game.
That's with the game. So $630, but it depends on how you play. You can do handheld, you can do tabletop, you can do it in dock. I have done for my Switch more docked play, but for portable play, I've been using it more for certain titles I feel comfortable playing in handheld mode, like visual novels and things like that. You know what I mean? But
Pro actually.
So the prices for the consoles, people, as we said there's a lot in this kit. You know what I mean? A lot in this console that we weren't expecting, and they've went all out. So people were like, okay, it's a little more on the expensive side, but I'm kind of okay. But it was the software that we talked about, this different pricing structure. We're not sure. It looks like depending on the game, some may be at $69.99 USD, but some may go up to $80. The $79.99, basically, if it's a quality title. Now, I will mention one key thing. We had talked about those remasters. We had talked about the physical editions. You know what also makes it egregious about what we talked about having download codes and only having a Switch One card? Some of those titles, actually, I think all of them, most of them, were $79.99. Like the ones that had new content, definitely $79.99. Breath of the Wild, I think they might have done $69.99, but a good portion of those remasters, the physical ones, are $79.99. Like it's just crazy. So I was never gonna buy that anyway, unless everything was on the cart and there probably was a decent sale. But this led to Treehouse again. So Treehouse Live was on YouTube and Twitch Thursday, Friday. Watched them, and on both platforms, YouTube and Twitch.
Oh, I know.
They were great presentation, all that stuff. But if you open the chat, it was relentless on both platforms from second one to the very end. Drop the price, drop the price, drop the price, and then raise the price. Yes, Kevin, you should join Team Support the Developers. Raise the price anyway. But it was relentless. So they know there was some blowback and stuff like that. And these are from the hardcore. But this was, I don't think it was terrorist. I think this was a cognizant decision. I think they think we know we're going to lose some sales, but we're going to make it up in the revenue and stuff like that. and the quality games we're charging for the higher end, people know the quality and we're going to deliver and stuff like that. And they're also thinking, and I'll just put it as a side note, and you had mentioned, Kevin, and I talked to others about the new Grand Theft Auto game, Grand Theft Auto 6.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to be a game that people like Take-Two and Rockstar and stuff like that. There's been talks of this game being $100 US. And that's for the base version. Base version. Not even all the extra early access and all that other nonsense. Base version for Grand Theft Auto 6. So I think if Take-Two and Rockstar see what Nintendo's doing, they're saying, let's go, because they know they have the people behind them. And so the reason why it's interesting on the Grand Theft Auto 6 thing is Grand Theft Auto 5. I didn't realize, I knew they had sold over 100 million copies and stuff like that. They've sold
across
over
3 generations.
They've sold over 200 million copies. 200 million copies of Grand Theft Auto 5 over all these generations.
3 generations.
And
this
then
came out on the 360 and the PS3.
Yeah. And then they added GTA Online, right?
Yep.
So that has kept them going. Now, they tried it with Red Dead Redemption 2, but Red Dead Redemption 2 did not work out for that online for that. But for whatever reason, Grand Theft Auto, it is such a lived-in world that people are willing to pay for Grand Theft Auto Online. So they're probably, some of that's going to be tied in, but it is such a cultural experience. And people who haven't even played video games, as we say, they know who Mario is. People know what Grand Theft Auto is. So it's going to take up the oxygen in the room when it's released. People are trying to release their games and get a waiver from it either after or before, because we still don't know if Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be released end of the year or even Q1 of next year, because it could get delayed, and that could affect a lot of games and stuff like that. But I think a lot of developers, talking back to Nintendo, they might say, you know what, maybe we can't go to Take-Two Grand Theft Auto 6 level $100, but they might thinking about, if Nintendo can do this, can we do this? But I think a lot of them that might try that solution are going to find out it's just not going to happen, because you have to have the quality in the product to actually have the balls to say, hey, this is the price we're going at. Yeah, it's harder than this, like higher than the standard, but if the consumer looks at it, they're just going to, some of them, they might just say no. Like if you look at Ubisoft, they are in the toilet, as I had talked about before in a previous stream. Basically, they're even more in the toilet now since then, but I don't think they could charge those prices even at $80 or something USD, just like Nintendo's doing. They just don't have the cachet. They don't have the quality behind them, in my mind. So it'll be interesting to see how this pricing model for Nintendo works, how it affects other publishers, but they have to have the game behind them. I think it gives a push to Take-Two for Grand Theft Auto 6. It'll be interesting to see where that lands, because it could be $100 USD, but it could also be similar to what Nintendo's trying to do with their higher end price games. But but where did these people make the money? As we know, for these companies, it's the software. That's where they make the money and stuff like that. So they're doing some calculus and stuff like that. And yes, it has been a while since Nintendo raised the prices, so to speak, or any of them did. So it'll be interesting to see how people react. People will have to make decisions of which games do I actually want to buy. It probably might not affect the indie games as much for some, depending on if they're on the lower priced end and stuff like that. So,
well, there's that, and like you said, the consoles are usually sold at a loss to start. So I don't know. Maybe there's a makeup point.
Give me Still Wakes the Deep for Switch 2, and that might force my hand, because then I won't have to consider begging Mike to play my PS5 copy at his place.
But
right.
Thinking of the prices, it comes back to one last point too that people were talking about, and that is the game card. So is the game on the card and stuff like that? And that is definitely a question people have, because they then talked about regular game cards. So like the Nintendo first party, all of them basically like they always are on the cart and stuff like that. So I put in the game card. I'm not downloading anything except maybe some patches and stuff like that, but it's not going to take space from my memory. And as we knew in the Switch generation, as Kevin alluded to before, some publishers decide we're not going to put all the game on the cart. We're just going to cheap out and have the smallest card available, and then you're going to have to download a massive patch for the rest of the game. Or in the more egregious cases, they release a box, and in the box is not even like a game card. It's just a code. Like it's just a code.
Oh,
Remember
talk about overpackaging, right?
So remember I talked to you, Mike, about how I was ticked off about Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I said, well, at least if you got the base game, you got the actual game, whereas on that special edition, you got all these knickknacks, but then they just gave you a game code. Like getting just a game code for a base edition, just baloney. But here is what they said. There was this other game card that they were calling a game key. We're going to have to see what happens on launch day, because Bravely Default, I believe, is one of the first games that's going to be on a quote-unquote game key.
And that and Street Fighter 6.
Yep, I wouldn't be surprised with that one either. We're going to have to
confirmed. Street Fighter 6 is confirmed because they showed packaging for that on a couple sites, and it has that disclaimer.
Oh, the wording. Yeah, the distinct wording. But no, what I was going to say is we're going to have to see for both of those, Kevin, about how this game key reacts, if it is like they've been saying, which is that it's almost like what they've been doing this past 2 generations with Xbox and PlayStation. So PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X. You would get the disc. It does have the data on the disc, but you're taking all that data from the disc and putting it on your console. You know what I mean? So it's almost like it's a key. It's like a key for your car, starts the game, and you need it each time. This one, it sounds like that there's something on the card, but it's telling your system, guess what? You're downloading the data for this onto your system, but you need the cartridge, the game key cartridge, in your system each time to say, yes, I have the right to play this game I've downloaded on my system and stuff like that. So that's a lot better than just having a code in the box. And I want to say that it should not hurt the resaleability of the cartridge if it's a game key cartridge, but we have to wait and see the first games like Bravely Default, like Street Fighter 6, to see how exactly it interacts and stuff like that with the system and stuff like that. And what happens if I use it the first time and then say I have Bravely Default, for example, say I got it, and then I put it in first, try it, and then decide to go over to Kevin and say, hey, Kevin, why don't you try this? Is it going to allow it to go on Kevin's system, even though I have used it before and stuff like that? Like it'll download to him and say, oh, yeah, you can use the same key code too. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That is the biggest question mark in my mind on that.
Hmm.
And then that makes me think, do I want to still get those games? Because I think Bravely Default is at possibly either the $70 or $80 price point. It's in between there somewhere. And that's the problem. All the game prices, some have been announced, so there's a lot of information still up in the air, and we're gonna have to see what happens. It sounds like up here in Canada, we're still going to have normal pre-orders just like the rest of the world, but the U.S.
last part of it, and this is the last part I wanted to get to. Yes,
the U.S. Nintendo America, along with GameStop in the U.S., sent out a thing, and it's just for the U.S. It sounds like, but because of all the tariff shenanigans and all this stuff, after you pissed off your consumer base, there was just one last way to do that, and that's to send out a thing saying, we know we said we were going to start pre-orders next week, but guess what? They are postponed due to further notice because we're not sure about the tariffs. We have to explore further options, which to some people is saying, I pray it stays the same price. And to others said, they're definitely raising the price and never lowering it again for the system. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. But they confirm Nintendo Switch 2 still releasing June 5th, 2025. But pre-orders will be delayed while we assess the impact, as you put on the screen there, Mike. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. And some of it comes into the fact that Nintendo tried to diversify where they were manufacturing. So like everyone else, they were in China, but then they have moved over to not just China for some of the consoles in recent years for Switch and now Switch 2, but to Vietnam. Also, I think they have some operations in the Philippines as well. But as you heard, Vietnam got hit hard with the round of tariffs, and I don't think they were probably expecting that. They probably thought some places might have less of an impact. So what they were trying to do was a shell game. So some of the Switch 2s they already have that because they've started the manufacturing way in advance, right?
Yeah.
Like way in advance. We knew they were stockpiling systems to guard against the scalpers. That early this year, they had made the shipments and it was publicly available to the US and probably to Canada as well. And for the US, at least, compared to other regions, they were getting those shipments not from the China plants, but from Vietnam.
There you go.
So you never know how this is going to play out and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting. Like, I think that this first batch will still probably sell out, but it's interesting to see how it goes. Or is it going to be like the Wii U with the one scalper that had a minivan full of Wii U's, and boy, did that investment turn out just fine.
Hey, like kind of like our investments over Thursday and Friday. Look, question. One last question though. With all the with the tours going on and the reveal tours, were you able to get tickets to the Toronto tour, James?
No, I think I told you that already, didn't I?
I know you tried.
Like everyone else, basically, it was no bueno. Like a lot of people really tried to get in this time, and I guess because obviously Switch is more of a success, a lot of people just were not able to get in. That I knew, like it was few and far between. So I didn't get in. I basically am on a standby list, and if a ticket for the Toronto event shows up, they will send me an email, and I have a certain amount of time
to
basically accept whatever time slot they gave me. But I don't think I think the Toronto event at the end of April, I don't think it's going to. I think a lot of people are going to keep their tickets. I think there are a lot of people that will be disappointed because I think you're basically for this one, they're tying it to your Nintendo Switch account and stuff like that. So you got to make sure you have the right Nintendo Switch account, you have the right person that you are and stuff like that. And so it's hard to say. Some people were doing shenanigans and stuff like that, creating Switch accounts, you know what I mean? Or trying to sell, trying to scalp. Yes, yeah. The price, you know what I mean? The admission to this, even though it was free. And they basically, if your name's not matching up, if you had sold it to someone, that person's probably out of luck. You're giving them nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But there were some people trying to scalp that, which is crazy.
Yeah, I will let you, and I mentioned this in a past stream. I saw a job posting for staff for that event.
Yeah, which is basically what they do that all the time.
Yeah,
like
contracted out, right?
Yeah, like what happened was they did it through the site through Nintendo this time. Last time when I did it for Switch 1, it was through Eventbrite, of course. Eventbrite.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, in your case. No, but, I was talking about staff for the event. Staffing for like the actual people who are working the event, right?
Yeah, no, I knew that too because it's just regular staff they hire and then they train them and stuff like that. And they talk about, and that's the thing that I think they're worried about on Nintendo too is people are going to ask questions to these staff members, and if it's about the games and all that other stuff, no problem. But people are going to be like, well, what's the price of this or what's whatever? And they've really put themselves in the weeds with the pricing situation and everything else. Like, I think they are in crisis. And the biggest problem is some of the people in outside of Kyoto want to say something or want to find a statement they can say to say something or send someone out there like Doug Bowser, because Doug Bowser hasn't said anything. He's president of Nintendo America. But the people in Kyoto, like, you have to go through the traditional chain and all that stuff to get stuff done. Very traditional Japanese company, very traditional Kyoto company. So I think the people in Kyoto need to get a better handle on this and probably take some advice probably from people in Europe, people in North America and stuff like that and other places to say we need to have clear communication about these prices and other things, because it's just been such a vacuum of information. And yeah, the information we have said has been fact checked, but you never know when that could change, right? Like it could definitely, there's a possibility it could change. It's weird to say, like nothing feels firm, to say the least, sometimes.
Well, maybe that's the world, just putting that out there. So the anticipation will start to build for pre-order day. So that's
that's coming out later this week.
Yeah, so Wednesday, right? The 9th?
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Like all the different retailers online and in store, and who knows, maybe on launch day there might. I don't think there's going to be any extras like we've seen with previous launches, but you never know. Maybe there are a few at a special launch event. But it'll be interesting to see. I think there were jokes of people crossing the northern border to try and buy some on launch day.
Yeah,
try getting that back into the U.S. and getting rid of the packaging when they see Switch 2 on the back of it.
Yeah, and then I just said do that, put that in the carton along with your eggs. So this is it. It's going to be it has my attention. I mean, even though I'm I've never played a Switch game, so this is it's a cultural thing. Nintendo is like they had a rebound generation, and now we're going to see how they capitalize on their rebound. So here we go.
Definitely, people aren't going to be buying multiple Switch 2s and stuff like that.
No, I'm pretty sure purchases will be limited.
Oh, that's what I was thinking too. Switch 2. Okay. The other
last thing, because we gotta get to the last thing.
I know they were talking about backwards compatibility. Remember, we said backwards compatibility. It's like, how are they going to do it from Switch to Switch 2? So it's not going to be like other generations where they had the technology of the previous console kind of basically in the system. So not like GBA slot in DS, or DS games being able to be played in 3DS, or Wii games being able to be played in Wii mode on the Wii U and stuff like that. They have a compatibility list on the site. It's probably going to be improved as we go along and stuff like that. But they had information on that developers talk, and it sounds like it's going to be similar what Microsoft did between Xbox and Xbox 360, where there's a bit of the hardware, there's a bit of emulation, stuff like that, because different architecture and stuff like that between the two systems. And so they've tried their best to make sure all of them are where they should be. Like Nintendo has 122 games. Basically, there's like one or two that aren't compatible with the Switch 2, and that's probably because it's Labo or Ring Fit or something like that. So they're all good, no issues found during basic compatibility testing. The partner games, which is third party, over 15,000 games, which is kind of crazy to think. It's just like maybe just over 20%, no issues found during basic compatibility testing. But then they have this other 75% where they said games can be started, further tests are in progress. So what that tells us is we can get to the menu, we can probably played some of the game, but we don't know how far you can go into the game. Maybe there are some issues, and that happened with some Xbox games on the 360. I think Jet Set Radio was one people had talked about on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, back then.
So
So we'll have to see how compatible those are. Then there's some that are issues were found during startup and stuff like that, and issues during certain parts of the game. So they had some issues in certain part of the game. There were some of those, but issues found during startup and not compatible. I think they still had a fair bit in there because over 15,000 third-party games. But I think I just want to see games that are playable. The issue of games that had issues from startup that may or may not be playable, it was interesting. It ran the gambit, like I told Kevin. Felix the Cat, which was a Carbon Engine limited run game, that was on there. River City Girls, the first game, was on there. So they're supposedly exploring with the developers, it says on the site, to see if they can fix the issues. But then it's like, how fully playable are these games going to be, especially on the third party end? And the poor people that have to play all those hentai girl games and those clock games and all the other fun asset flips we saw on the Switch generation.
yeah, so
But
not,
for that, it, you know what it's telling me? Like, I think I'm in for Switch 2, but I'm not going to trade in my Switch 1 because I'm going to keep it so that I can make sure I have 100% compatibility with my game. So what you can do with the Switch, and I'm sure it'll be the same with Switch 2, is I'm going to say, Switch 2, you are my default console. And then you can have like a secondary console, right? That'll allow you to play the games on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically my Switch will become the secondary console, and then I can keep the micro SD with all the games on it, the 1 terabyte one, and keep it there as an extra place to play and stuff like that. But then it's not going to take up as much room, hopefully, on the Switch 2 with the micro express SD, because as we said, micro express SD only playable on the Switch 2. The regular micro SD can't be used on Switch 2, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it goes.
That's the way it goes. But
I'm sure there'll be more nuggets to find as we go along.
Much of it we'll just have to trip on anyway. But
just feels like it's just been one story. Like, we knew there was going to be fun and all that stuff. Like, it was a great direct, but you knew that a ball was dropped when you didn't see anything about price of games or console. And so people were scrambling to find that out the day of, and once they saw it, it was kind of like, oh, this is where we are. It's like, you guys decided to go, but it'll be interesting to see like how it goes. I think they'll still get the sales. I think if they are doing what it looks like different tiers of pricing, that if it's the new $69.99 USD pricing for certain games, that's fine. But if they think it's a class above, like it's their Breath of the Wild, it's their Mario Kart World and stuff like that, I think they'll probably be able to get away with the $80 US game pricing, and even in Canada, over $100. But it has to be the right game. Like, if other people think they can just throw it in carbon copy on their end for third parties, they're going to be sadly mistaken, and they're going to have games that just will not sell on a digital we're going to fun, or will be sitting in a warehouse if they have
what can you get away with, right? And that's where we're about, and we're going to find out a little bit of that story in the next.
But I think some developers, like for the third party, I think they were already talking about this when we talked about Grand Theft Auto 6. But now with Nintendo in the mix, there are going to be some that are going to be thinking, well, I'm not going to go to $100, but I wonder if I can get to $80. And I think some of them still won't be able to make that jump.
We'll find out. Okay. So that's that for the Switch 2. We'll talk about the fall. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the fallout from the pre-orders next time we all gather around the table. Okay, we've used up a lot of time.
Well, I knew that was going to happen because there was way too much information.
It's a lot. It's a lot to digest, and that is the news of that is a big piece of news, especially amongst the overlapping fandom and those of us who are into this. So let's reel back, and we only really got a couple minutes, so maybe we'll have to take another time to expand on it in the future. Kevin, you brought our attention to a Business Insider article, which is now behind a paywall, by the way. But it was an interview with, a quick essay by the person behind Mint Fantome. So I'll show the basics of the article here. Do you want a quick summary? Can you give me a quick summary of this article, Kevin? Or is Kevin there? Well, I did a quick skim. I did a quick skim of the article, and basically, it's Mint talking in their real voice, I guess, in many ways, right?
Yeah. So I think her name is Made Phantom because it's supposed to mimic like the word phantom with a PH. Although I haven't watched her live streams before, so I'm not 100% sure how that's pronounced, but I'm assuming it's Phantom and not like a Japanese like Fantome.
Okay.
But
yeah, there's like a
it wouldn't shock me.
accent
And
over the O, isn't there? So.
And yes, and what do I know some days, right?
But basically, Mint, we usually call, like, people in the VTubing sphere will usually call her Made Mint because there are different VTubers with the name Mint. Another VTuber I've occasionally watched that's also named Mint is called Mint Costella, who is a bigger dog human VTuber. But in any case, she's really good though. But in any case, Made Mint is a VTuber that is considered an indie VTuber. So she's not affiliated with any large corporation or any company really. Like, she is her own independent self. She was formerly part of Niji Sanji's English division. Her previous life, so we say in that world, was Pomu Rainpuff. But this article essentially talks about none of the past in that sense. It really just talks about, it's a general summary of how she describes her life right now as a virtual YouTuber. So the article goes on about a few different things. So she talks about how, she is essentially an online personality. She is an anime girl, as we all know. She talks about how, right as of this article, she now has 347,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Good for her.
Yep. So she does not stream on Twitch. She streams on YouTube. And that's also why I don't really watch her content, because I just do not like YouTube as a live streaming platform.
Mm-hmm. That's why we more or less stayed on Twitch at this point. But
yeah. So she is now full-time. Previously, she wasn't sure if she was going to stick around and do this full-time. Because when she graduated from Niji Sanji, and by graduate we mean when she quit, because that's the term that they use in the VTubing world. It's kind of akin to the idol world when idols graduate. It borrows from that culture. She wasn't sure if she was going to go back to it in any full-time or any meaningful capacity. Like, she was thinking maybe she'd stick around and do things occasionally, because she did have this persona previous to her joining Niji Sanji, which would have been a few years ago. So she talks about how she is a part of a growing trend of virtual influencers called VTubers, which is the short form for virtual YouTubers. And yes, she does make it a point to be anonymous. That is normally the reason why a lot of VTubers go this route, or at least it's usually a primary factor, because a lot of them perhaps don't want to show their real face.
a lot of them perhaps think that because they want to play a character, which is in a way also an extension of themselves in many cases, because that's the appeal of a VTuber at times.
Blurring the character and them and their reality, right?
Yeah, like I find one reason why people like VTubers is because even though most are playing a character, it's the occasional or maybe intentional slip of their own self coming out through them portraying these characters is why people are drawn to it. So there adds an element of connection there.
Well, Steve Austin, the former wrestler, and he always said, this is the Stone Cold character, like to say, is me. It's just I'm loud. That's a louder version of me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he once said about his wrestling persona. So I guess this is what we say. Take that thought and put it here as well, right?
Yes.
Stretching out themselves.
So she goes on to say how she's joked with her friend that her job is like the show Severance, where the virtual characters we play online are like our innies, which are the separate workplace identities of the show's characters. So I think this is important. How, she says that the character I created allows me to have a public persona online without fully sharing my personal self. And then she goes on to say, like with many others, she discovered virtual YouTubers several years ago, and that her main influence was through HoloLive, which is what many would now consider the premier VTuber corporation agency.
Yep. Almost without a doubt.
Yeah. And so through watching HoloLive, she felt that this is maybe something she could try out for herself. So she went through the audition process, didn't get in, but then she also ended up interacting and meeting with other independent VTubers who inspired her to try it out for herself. So she started during the 2020. This was the pandemic. And she didn't tell anyone. Although some of her friends eventually found out because they recognized her voice. And she did eventually tell her parents, more specifically her mom. And she says, my mom still doesn't quite understand it, but she knows that I've always loved Japanese culture and anime. She can't believe what she thought was a phase has evolved into my career. So she also starts to go into how she earns money. So remember, this is a Business Insider article. So by and large, most people reading this don't understand the concept of a VTuber. So it's essentially outlining what she does. So the article states, and I guess this is through her own words, most of my income comes from donations on YouTube. That's just out of people's generosity. And it's how I've been able to maintain this as a career. And I also sell merchandise and promote brands through sponsorships. So for those who aren't aware, these YouTube donations can either come in the form of subscriptions, where you pay a monthly fee to basically use emotes or emoticons, as that was the old way of saying emotes, and
or sometimes front of the line in the chat, I guess, highlighted chats.
Well, some of them you can just pay money just to have a comment highlighted or put above others, right? So
I guess that's how I'm going to take your guys' word for it, just because I really I almost never go on YouTube to watch live streams.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to assume you can dodge ads, because I know on Twitch you can watch, when you subscribe to someone, you watch them ad free. You don't get any ads at all.
Yeah, that's probably, I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case here either. So,
Well, then it leads to the question of what about for Twitch and YouTube, the subscriber model where it's just what do they call? I forget what they call it for YouTube and Twitch, but for just across the board, where it's like I pay Twitch or YouTube a certain amount of money each month, and then I'm ad free, so to speak. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
not sure if
Oftentimes,
that plays into the factor too.
oftentimes, yes, YouTube or Twitch will take a cut of your subscription money that you receive.
Mhm.
How much of a cut they take depends on how many people you have subscribing to you. So, if I'm not mistaken, on Twitch, when you hit the level 2 of what they call, like, I think, of the Plus membership, you end up getting 70% of the cut and Twitch gets 30. So that's
It's a partner, I believe it's called.
Yes.
I think that's
so
right.
there's partner, and then there's partner plus 1 and partner plus 2. There we go.
And we're still working towards affiliate, by the way.
So ideally, you want to hit partner plus 2 as a streamer if you want to make any money out of this, because then you only give Twitch 30% of
the cut.
But some of the other donations, and I could see subscriptions, I'm not sure if they mentioned in the article, is probably stuff like Patreon or things like that as well.
Yes. So you could straight up donate to the streamer if you wish outside of the platform. And that tends to be that's the more appreciated donation for many people, because obviously you just straight up get that money most of the time. So she goes on to say, more and more VTubers are infiltrating Western culture. For example, Hololive did have VTubers collaborate with the LA Dodgers. And I've seen other independent VTubers work with hockey teams and at other events where you maybe wouldn't expect to see an anime girl. It's true.
The Ducks, I think, was recent. So
yes,
Anaheim Ducks had that.
Yes. And it makes sense that you see more of these in California because you have a large Asian population in California. And you do, like, because this whole concept of the VTuber originated in Japan, makes sense.
Sure. Especially since some of the biggest Japanese stars are also in the LA area too. At least sports-wise, right?
Yep. And she continues on that she has performed at a couple of live concerts. And I want to do more. At these shows, I'll dance and sing with other VTubers. Online, everybody is just a number and a username on the chat box. But with live events, I can feel a true connection. Yep, she's gone on to do a couple of concerts. Yeah, which, like, they'll usually have a few other VTubers kind of open, but then I know she is likely going to be a headliner at this point. She even was at Anime North last year as a sort of unofficial guest in a way, because I know the Animaple rave group has run raves in the parking lot at Anime North, and Maid showed up there last year.
In person? Virtually?
I'm assuming virtually.
Probably virtual, yeah.
The only VTuber that I believe showed up in person was Doki Bird.
Well, and she had made news already earlier in the year too, right?
Yeah, and I say that because, like, Doki Bird is Canadian, although if I'm not mistaken, she is based on the West Coast, but she's known to show up at cons to buy her own merch. So it's like a nice little, it's a nice little gesture that she does. And I've heard of firsthand accounts of this happening too through friends and acquaintances.
That's cool.
But in any case,
let's finish. And
so she talks about her average day, like what an average day looks like to her. So she'll say that she tries to stream 2 to 4 hours a day on YouTube. It doesn't seem to go about how many days a week she does it, so I don't know her schedule. Filming is simpler than people think. She uses a phone, and there are other programs that VTubers use to generate their avatar. So some of the common ones are VTube Studio and VC Face. She says she has some experience due to going to school for filmography, but she mainly used tutorials on YouTube to figure it out. She talked about how she used to stream in her closet. Now she does have her own room dedicated to it. And then when she's not streaming, she creates her own graphics and thumbnails. She'll scroll through Twitter, going through different hashtags, and then tries to take notes on, or not tries, she does take notes on ideas for merch or perhaps for her streams. She does say that it's hard for her to turn the switch off. And then in her words, she says, some creators can say that they don't go online or on social media at certain times. I don't have strict boundaries like that. Instead, I log off from my job by browsing my personal Instagram and TikTok accounts, which are centered on my hobbies and interests, such as Japanese culture and anime. I think the last little part is where she says how her passion for anime helped her break into the industry, and she considers virtual YouTubers as a part of that. And as in any aspect of entertainment, so much success is the luck of the draw. When I'm streaming, I'll see a number on the screen of how many people are watching. Maybe the number says 3,000, but I can't fully comprehend that 3,000 people are watching me. I know that they are people, and I know that their usernames represent a person. But even after all these years, I feel so ordinary. I don't feel like an influencer. And then she goes on to say that the anonymity aspect has been great for her because she doesn't feel like she's a very public person because of her shyness and because of her social anxieties. But ultimately, chatting for hours a day online has really helped me come out of my shell, out of my comfort zone. So I'm grateful that I get to do this job. So it's a very broad article on what VTuber does.
Yeah, it's an overview. It's an overview for those of us who are really, really uninitiated, and probably even still helps those who aren't really into it, who don't really keep up, like myself, right?
Yeah.
But I have an understanding of its existence and some basic parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, look, there's one part of me that's impressed with her, and maybe even and maybe some envy, because of course this is what we're doing here now these days too, under this podcast's name, with doing the streams of video game plays. But there's also a part of me that's also concerned for her, right?
In what sense?
Okay. Well, how much of her, she's valuing her anonymity, and some of it has been, she's been recognized in some point at least by friends, and how much can that go? Also, yes, it does depend.
Because I've heard stories from HoloLive VTubers that they've had people, like friends of friends, realize who they are, and then they had to whip out the NDA forms.
Oh yeah, okay. So have your checks and balance right in place. The other part
depends on the person and who you work for, or if you work for yourself and you have that,
and maybe how quick you are. Daryl Surratt. I remember. So Surratt stuck out, saying, he had a comment to me that stuck out, and he said he could never do this type of stuff, to do live streaming. And this is when you are known. It's because he says you become slaves to always making content, and that's not the way he wants to do his life. And
that makes sense for him, because he has a 9-to-5.
He has a 9-to-5. Mint,
all of them do, to my knowledge. All three of them, Gerald and Clarissa, have 9-to-5s.
Yes, and and
Anime World Order, for those wondering.
Yeah, the AWO guys, and for her, like she said, when I'm not streaming, I create my own graphics and thumbnails. Yeah, this is a lot. It's you have to have a multi-talent, and you wonder, will she burn out? That's always the concern for any streamer, right?
Yeah,
I guess I'm not sure it's compounded or because of or maybe helped because of her degree of anonymity to this point. But sorry, Kevin.
Oh, no worries. It's just because not everyone can create their own art assets too. Some people just don't have the aptitude for it. So
no, I'm trying to teach myself how to make a thumbnail just enough to make it last for the week video stays on stream on Twitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and maybe I'll have to look up those tutorials myself to make a thumbnail if I ever have the time to, or one, have the time to do this, or to give myself the time to do this, because there's other things that I admit there on a personal level. There are other things that I now have to deal with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we just talked about that before we started. So it's intriguing overview, and and maybe we start to peel. It's a chance to peel back some of the layers, just in another way, at least in one VTuber's own words, right?
And a big one, no less.
Mm-hmm.
So she is one of the biggest independent English VTubers.
So she is noteworthy in that sense too, and good for and maybe as somebody who wants to be in that position at some point.
It really helped, and to provide some context, because this is not brought up in the article, a couple of things really helped her out in that sense. So the first thing is that you had a chunk of her fan base from her previous line of employment, or her previous employer, I should say,
mm-hmm.
who were able to piece together that her as Pomu Rainpuff also had her previous life, as they say, as Mint Fantome. So then you already have an existing audience base to draw from. And then what happened was that a bug VTuber by the name of Matara Khan did a summer podcast with Mint. So Mint and Matara are close friends. This is where anybody who cares about past lives, spoiler alert, because people care about that. I should have prefaced this in the very beginning of the article, or of this segment. But Matara Khan of the shoujo also formerly worked at Niji Sanji's English branch. Her previous incarnation from Niji Sanji was by the name of Nina Kosaka. So these two knew each other from
past work.
From before they both became independent, or independent again in Mint's case.
Mm-hmm.
And that also brought on a lot of that also gave her a good amount of attention, because now you also have the V Shoujo fan base to draw from. And this is not to discount her own talents as well.
Well,
being entertaining or endearing or whatever her appeal is, of course.
Yeah, but to me,
it certainly helps.
It certainly helps. Look, you take whatever, you take whatever advantage you can get. You take whatever break you can get, right? You still have to prove yourself to stay there.
Yes, and that is why, from what I can tell, and this is also in any occupation, that it is so important to put yourself out there and to network with people.
Mm-hmm. It's good to know, or in other words, it's good to know people.
And I see this in some of the VTubers that I routinely watch or have on in the background while I watch and do my own things, that I have noticed other VTubers, popping in to say hi. Chances are they've already known each other in the past, but sometimes it's also a matter of, they probably generally enjoy watching them as well.
Yeah.
But yes, it never hurts.
Well, it's a fraternity in many ways. Like, not everybody is privileged to have that, to do this and have something out, make something of it, right?
Yes.
So, they can either support each other or try and throw each other under the bus, which happens quite a bit too. But
Yep.
I'm glad to hear about stories where they do try and prop each other up, right?
Yeah, like, and my favorite VTuber.
Yeah. And we got to finish up soon, right?
Yeah, one of the VTubers that I watch, who's I would say is my favorite one right now. She's always said that, like, she truly believes in the whole, like, a rising tide raises all ships. That quote, where, like, it's good to have everyone. If more people know about this stuff, then yeah, everyone benefits from it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's because it makes everybody look good. Look, somebody once told me it's like when I started training for a new job, they would say it's in none of our interests to see any of you fail, because it means we're not doing our job well, and then who would want to work under us, right? And I think that's sort of the same thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Just that some envy there, but I'm glad she is willing to peel back some of the layers about how her day to day, and I can't say I'll be able to keep up, because in the end we're still doing our things here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I appreciate her. I appreciate the degree of candor she was willing to go through with that, and as I said, it sounds like she's she said she's shy, and I take her at her word. Because that must make a small effort to open up just a little bit like that. So there's that. And as I said, I want to at least touch on it a little bit, because this is where we are. I get it. These are the talking about video games, talking about the VTubers in the back end, for the bulk of this episode, as we just did. It's not totally on the anime track, but it is overlapping. And it is also a reflection of where the roundtable is right now, right? With us doing a video game stream. With us, with me playing Yakuza Kiwami 2 on a stream. So I'm curious to hear these parts of it as the industries that much of fandom has grown to love through this. Through the anime fandom has kind of overlapped into. So that's why I had no problems going having the route, having the agenda, the path go through like we did today, right? Because we love anime, but the what people are into evolves as well. That's related, but we wouldn't be fans here, if we didn't start there, right? So they're all related. So all of this is related in many ways. They all tie into each other, and that's probably why we end up talking about it for as long as we do too. Almost 3 hours. Although, assuming we can end in the next couple minutes, it won't be as long as when James and I last talked a couple weeks ago.
So we can make it happen.
Maybe not, because I have to get. Huh?
This reporter, Amanda Pirelli, seems to have at least some exposure to VTubers, because.
Amanda Pirelli. No, that name does sound familiar. Yes.
Yeah, she tends to write about YouTube on Business Insider, from what I can glean from a quick glance at her profile page on Business Insider, but. She actually also wrote an article about how she attended the Mori Calliope concert in Hollywood.
She's that name does sound very familiar. So
went to Mori Calliope is a very popular member of HoloLive's English division, and she did like a concert in LA, and it sold out. Well, 4,000 seater, but sold out.
But we are talking about the evolution of entertainment within this guise in the internet age, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when this is how it's coming, this is how it's starting to evolve. This is how we're actually seeing it in something tangible, right? In a tangible form. So, we're a lot of the rest of the world is still trying to process it, especially if you're old enough. I mean, my best friend is father to a couple teenagers, and a few of them are into this or would draw this, and he would show me pictures of characters his kid has drawn, and I say, "Who's this?" And he would ask me, "Who is this?" And I'd have to sometimes look it up, but then I can give him a better context of what he's looking at. Turns out his daughter can draw Miku pretty well. So and this is maybe something we all could do as older fans. We can help guide our friends who are parents and have teenage kids to help them to start to understand it through another guy's, right? Through our age, right? So maybe that's what we can still offer to the world ourselves. The 50-year-old gamer. Okay. So on that note, let's call it, because we do have our other pursuits to stick with.
There was one thing, Mike.
Oh, please. What is that last thing? Just quickly.
The community calendar. Remember?
One thing. What caught your attention?
Well, no. Well, what was it? By the end. So we're in April right now. Just a date and stuff like that. By I think April 30th, you have to register for, was it Anime Revolution Toronto at their discount, I believe, don't you? And that's to be in at $50 Canadian. So that'll be interesting. But for anyone who wants the discount, you have until the end of April 30th, to register. For the discount for Anime Revolution, and that's in November. But the interesting thing is, I had went to an event, and I told you guys last week, called Toronto Game Expo, which was at the exhibition center and stuff like that. And they gave a card of when their next event is going to be for Toronto Game Expo, which is November 22nd and 23rd, which, if you look at the screen for those watching the video version, Anime Revolution Toronto is going to also be at the Metro Convention Center. So in Toronto, 21st to 23rd. So the same weekend. So I'm intrigued to see how that works out more on, as I told Mike and Kevin, the Artist Alley side, because we had talked about the Artist Alley for the last two Anime Torontos and stuff like that. And we know Anime Revolution had a hand at that dealer's room and the Artist Alley and stuff like that, and see if lessons were learned for this one coming up, and how many people that might have went to Anime Revolution might say, you know what, maybe I'll just go to anime like Toronto Game Expo instead, because from all of those events, even though they've been one-day events, and the one last weekend was their first two-day event, which was Saturday, Sunday, they filled the Queen Elizabeth building, basically, which is beside BMO Field. They filled that building, and there were people going up and down the lines for the people selling video games in the Game Swamp. But there were some people going up and down the areas for the Artist Alley, which there were quite a few people in the Artist Alley. And then they had other areas as well for indie games and arcades games and stuff like that. But I think there was enough that people were walking around that they could probably get some sales and stuff like that. Whereas I remember Anime Toronto, as we had said, it felt like it was kind of almost like no one was walking towards the Artist Alley, like it was vacant in certain spots, depending on where they had placed you, right?
Well, yeah, it's a place you can take a nap. Look.
But it'll be interesting to see how that goes for them on the Artist Alley side, since now they have a video game event and then an anime event at the end of November there.
And yeah, much of it on the same weekend. Well, Anime Revo will have another issue to deal with, I guess.
Yeah,
and,
I go to Revo because I don't like video games enough to go to a video game event, especially when that event seems largely based on spending money there.
Yeah, they had a bit more of a mix this time, so they are starting to get some video game guests and had one main stage. They're going into a bigger place in November. The Better Living Center supposedly is where they're going at the X Grounds there. But the bread and butter of that for the Toronto Game Expo, is kind of like a swap meet, a lot of video game vendors and stuff like that. But in the artist alley, yes, there were people doing stuff for video games and stuff like that, but there was a lot of people doing stuff for anime and other pursuits. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll have to keep up when the time comes.
Yeah, I don't know if I can even go to Anime Revo because it will actually. I might not even be around
in the country.
I have to double check.
Okay. Well, and sometimes you can't always predict 6 months down the road, 6 or 7 months down the road, and that's when those will be, right? But we have to finish up. We have to finish up April 6th first. So, quick programming note. I'll be online. I'll be online a little later this afternoon just to continue the Yakuza Kiwami 2 stream. We are now in chapter 15, just for reference, but I'm not sure we'll go there. And we'll try and I'll try and do the usual streams Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but no promises there. Life does get in the way once in a while.
And a couple other like community calendar notes that I just thought of now.
Okay.
The Oshi Konbini event is going on in downtown Toronto right now. Actually, I think it's running until 5 p.m. It's
Today?
like a small V-Tuber event by like a group of people. They actually did have a couple of V-Tuber guests as well. To my recollection, it was Ashton Martin and Pia P UFO. Pia, I actually do watch on occasion. She's pretty fun. But I'm curious to see if they'll grow that event over time, because it's technically a free event right now, but then there were like VIP badges you could pay for a extra charge. Also, Anime Ottawa is
that's coming up. I know that.
Yeah.
That's the coming weekend, right?
I'm still debating if I should go.
You have time. I don't. So
I may not, depending on what happens to me, but I'm thinking about it still. Although I better decide quickly because that's Easter weekend when that happens.
That's coming up anyway, and that's it.
That's it.
Well, that's then we should get going. I have there's other things to eventually do today. As I said, we'll hopefully be back. I'll hopefully be back with you a little later this afternoon and continue that stream. But in any event, that's all we got for this afternoon. If you're on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up or leave us your comments down below, or go to animeroundtable.com for all the ways you can reach us. That includes links to the socials, YouTube, and Twitch accounts. As for the podcast side, please leave us a review if you can, wherever you get your podcasts, as it would greatly help us. Right, Kevin?
Sure would.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, any sort of constructive criticism or feedback is always appreciated because we get to know who's out there.
Yeah. Well, a quick and on that note, thank you to Greetings Hero and Mahara for passing by the stream this afternoon. Since we're on Twitch and YouTube a little bit more, give us a follow or subscribe there so you can be notified whenever we do something new there. Also, if you have a Spotify account, please check out the Anime Roundtable playlist for a list of music based on things we've mentioned on this show. And once again, I did put it up on the screen just now. I'll be back this in a couple hours on Twitch, twitch.tv/Anime Roundtable. We'll hang out just for a little bit, play. Probably try and finish the third league in the Cabaret Club and the Cabaret Club Grand Prix. Okay, which means confronting Shoko. So maybe just we'll get into a bit of chapter 15 and then focus there for the rest of the stream. But in any event, I need to get something to eat. It's we've been at this for almost 3 hours now, and I need lunch. James, Kevin, thanks for the time.
You're welcome.
No problem.
Yeah, let's do this again in a week or two. Okay. Everyone else, thanks for watching and listening. Have a good afternoon from Toronto. Join us again for another edition of the Anime Roundtable.
Huh.